At that time, Mahamate, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, asked the Blessed One to explain concerning the deep-seated attachment to the existence of all things and the way of emancipation, saying, "Pray tell me, Blessed One, pray tell me, Tathagata, Arhat, fully enlightened one, concerning the characteristics of our deep attachment to existence and of our detachment from it. When I and other Bodhisattva Mahasattvas understand well the distinction between attachment and detachment, we shall know what is the skillful means concerning them, and shall no more become attached to words according to which we grasp meaning. When we understand well what is meant by attachment to the existence of all things and the detachment from them, we shall destroy our discrimination of words and letters, and by means of our wisdom, enter into all the Buddha lands and assemblies. Be well stamped with the stamp of the powers, the self-control, the psychic faculties, and the dharanis, and well furnished with the wisdom in the 10 inexhaustible vows, and shining with varieties of rays pertaining to the transformation body, behave ourselves with effortlessness, like the moon, the sun, the jewel, and the elements, and hold such views at every stage as are free from all the signs of self-discrimination, and seeing that all things are like a dream, like Maya, etc., shall be able to enter the stage and abode of Buddhahood, and deliver discourses on the Dharma to the world of all beings, and in accordance with their needs, and free them from the dualistic notion of being and non-being in the contemplation of all things which are like a dream and Maya, and free them also from the false discrimination of birth and destruction, and finally shall be able to establish ourselves where there is a revulsion at the deepest recesses of our consciousness, which is more than words can express." Said the Blessed One, well said, Mahamati. Listen well to me then, Mahamati, and reflect well within yourself. I will tell you." Mahamati, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said, "Certainly I will, Blessed One," and gave ear to the Blessed One. The Blessed One said to him thus, "Mahamati, immeasurable is our deep-seated attachment to the existence of all things, the significance of which we try to understand afterwards. For instance, there are the deep-seated attachments to signs of individuality, to causation, to the notion of being and non-being, to the discrimination of birth and no birth, to the discrimination of cessation and no cessation, to the discrimination of vehicle and no vehicle, of samskrita and asamskrita, of the characteristics of the stages and no stages, and the attachment to discrimination itself, and to that arising from enlightenment, the attachment to the discrimination of being and non-being on which the philosophers are so dependent, and the attachment to the triple vehicle and the one vehicle, which are discriminated. These and others, Mahamati, are the deep-seated attachments cherished by the ignorant and simple-minded due to their discriminations. Tenaciously attaching themselves to these, the ignorant and simple-minded go on ever discriminating, like the silkworms who, with their own thread of discrimination and attachment, enwrap not only themselves but others, and are charmed with the thread. And thus they are ever tenaciously attached to the notions of existence and non-existence. But really, Mahamati, there are no signs here of deep-seated attachment or detachment. All things are to be seen as abiding in solitude, where there is no evolving of discrimination. Mahamati, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva should have his abode where he can see all things from the viewpoint of solitude. Further, Mahamati, when the existence and non-existence of the external world are understood to be due to the seeing of the mind itself in these signs, the Bodhisattva can enter upon the stage of imagelessness, where mind only is, and there see into the solitude which characterizes the discrimination of all things as being and non-being, and the deep-seated attachments resulting therefrom. This being so, there are in all things no signs of a deep-rooted attachment or of detachment. Here, Mahamate, is nobody in bondage, nobody in emancipation, except those who, by reason of their perverted wisdom, recognize bondage and emancipation. Why? Because in all things neither being nor non-being is to be taken hold of. Further, Mahamate, there are 3 attachments deep-seated in the minds of the ignorant and simple-minded. They are greed, anger, and folly. And thus there is desire, which is procreative and is accompanied by joy and greed. Closely attached to this, there takes place a succession of births in the 5 paths. Thus, there are the 5 paths of existence for all beings who are found closely attached to greed, anger, and folly. When one is cut off from this attachment, no signs will be seen indicative of attachment or of non-attachment. Further, Mahamate, depending upon and attaching to the triple combination which works in unison, there is the continuation of the vijnanas incessantly functioning. And because of the attachment, there is continued and deep-felt assertion of existence. When the triple combination which causes the functioning of the vijnanas no more takes place, there is the triple emancipation. And when this is kept in view, there is no arising of any combination. So it is said. The imagining of things not existent, this is characteristic of attachment deeply seated in all beings. When the truth of this is thoroughly understood, the net of attachment is cleared away. The ignorant take hold of the knowledge of existence according to words, and are bound up like the silkworm with their own discriminations. Hence, their ignorance of attachment deeply seated in their minds. Further, Mahamati said, according to the Blessed One, in all things that are variously discriminated by discrimination, there is no self-nature, as it is nothing but the creation of false imagination, or parikalpita. If, Blessed One, it is but the creation of false imagination, and there is nothing in the world which is to be conceived as indicative of self-nature, does it not, Blessed One, come to this, according to your statement, that there is neither defilement nor purification, because all things are of the nature of false imagination? Said the Blessed One, Mahamati, it is just as you say. The self-nature of things is the discrimination of the ignorant and simple-minded, and it is not as it is discriminated by them. Mahamati, it is the creation of false imagination. Nothing indicative of self-nature is to be ascertained. But, Mahamati, there is the self-nature of things such as is ascertained by the wise, by their wise knowledge, by their wise insight, by their wise transcendental vision. Said Mahamati, Blessed One, if there is the self-nature of things such as ascertained by the wise, by their wise knowledge, by their wise insight, by their wise transcendental vision, which is neither human nor celestial vision, and if there is no such self-nature as is discriminated by the ignorant and simple-minded, how, Blessed One, can the ignorant and the simple-minded abandon their discrimination, as they have no way to recognize the presence of an exalted reality? For they are neither perverted nor unperverted, Blessed One. That is, they are what they are. Why? Because they are unable to have an insight into the self-nature of exalted reality, because they see the course of things in the aspect of being and non-being. And, Blessed One, the reality cannot be such as is discriminated even by the wise, because the aspect of reality as it is in itself cannot be an object of discrimination by anybody. Because, Blessed One, what appears to the wise as the self-nature of reality is no more than the creation of their imagination, which is predicable with the notion of causation and no causation. That is, they also cherish in their own way the idea of a being with self-nature, and they would say that this is a realm that belongs to somebody else and is not that of the ignorant. This is committing the fault of non-finality, For thus what constitutes the self-nature of reality becomes impossible to know. Blessed One, what is derived from the imagination cannot be the self-nature of reality. How is it that while things are said to exist owing to the imagination or discrimination, they are said again not to be such as are imagined? Blessed One, it is true that according to the way the imagination is carried on, the self-nature of reality conceived may vary. For when the cause is not alike, the notion of reality that thus comes to be cherished may not be alike. But according to you, Blessed One, while the imagination is kept on going with the wise as well as with the ignorant, the latter alone fail to see reality as it is. And yet you tell us that the reason why it is said that things are not really such as are imagined by the imagination is to make all beings discard their imagination. Now, Blessed One, is it that in order to have all beings free from the notion of being, which is a realism, and of non-being, which is nihilism, you in turn make them cherish a realistic view of existence by telling them to uphold the idea of a self-nature of reality, whereby they are led to cling to the realm of noble wisdom? Why do you deny the truth of solitude by teaching the doctrine of reality whose self-nature is, according to you, noble wisdom? Said the Blessed One, Mahamate, it is not true that I deny truth of solitude, nor that I fall into a realistic view by upholding the noble doctrine of self-existing reality. But in order to save all beings from becoming frightened, who are addicted from beginningless past to the notion of self-nature, it is told them that there is truth of solitude, after making them realize by means of noble wisdom that reality in its self-nature is made the subject of attachment by the ignorant. Mahamate, the doctrine of self-nature is not taught by me, but Mahamate, those who have realized by themselves truth of solitude as it really is, and are abiding in it, will see that this existence of error has no form, and thereby knowing that what is seen as nothing but the mind itself, they are kept away from dualistically viewing an external world under the aspects of being and non-being. They are stamped well with the stamp of suchness, which is gained by the triple emancipation. They will have an intuition into the self-nature of all things by the wisdom which is acquired within themselves, and thus get away from such ideas of reality as to lead themselves to realism and nihilism. Further, Mahamate, the thesis that all things are unborn is not to be maintained by the Bodhisattva Mahasattva as valid. Why? Of this thesis it is to be stated that anything of which something is asserted partakes thereby of the nature of being, and the reason for this thesis is characterized with the quality of birth. While it is being asserted by the Bodhisattva Mahasattva that all things are unborn, the very assertion destroys his thesis. The thesis that all things are unborn acts against the one who holds it, because it is born of the principle of mutuality. Even when this thesis of no birth is to be maintained within the extent of existence itself, the notion of no birth cannot hold itself in it, and the statement, the thesis, that all things are unborn is destroyed, since it is dependent on the members of the syllogism. As regards the thesis maintaining the no birth of being and non-being, Mahamate, this thesis, to be valid, must be within the limits of existence itself. But there is no aspect of existence which can be regarded either as being or as non-being. If, Mahamate, the no birth of all things is to be asserted by this thesis of no birth, the very attempt defeats the thesis itself. Therefore, this thesis is not to be upheld. Because many faults come out in connection with the members of the syllogism, and because in these syllogistic members there is a mutually mixing up of reasons, this thesis is not to be upheld. As with the thesis that all things are unborn, so with the thesis that all things are empty and have no self-nature. Neither is to be maintained by the Bodhisattva Mahasattva. But, Mahamate, this is to be pointed out by the Bodhisattva Mahasattva. that things in their self-nature are like Maya, like a dream, for they are in one way perceived as existing, and in another way are not perceived as such. And all things are thus seen in two ways, in accordance either with knowledge or ignorance. Let it be pointed out that all things are like Maya and a dream, except when the feeling of fear is aroused in the minds of the ignorant. Mahamate, the ignorant and the simple-minded are addicted to the views of being and non-being, and are liable to tremble at our teaching. Mahamate, let them not be frightened away from the Mahayana. So it is said, there is no self-nature, no thought construction, no reality, no alaya vijnana. These, indeed, are so many discriminations cherished by the ignorant who, like a corpse, are bad logicians. All things are unborn. This thesis is established by all the philosophers, but nothing whatever is ever born. No establishment is needed. Things are all linked by causation. All things are unborn. No such discrimination is made by transcendental knowledge. When a certain conclusion is made depending on a cause, there is no sound judgment in it. As a hairnet is what is wrongly perceived by those who are dim-eyed, so existence discriminated as real is due to the wrong discrimination of the ignorant. The triple world is no more than thought construction. There is no reality in its self-nature. By means of this thought-constructed reality, logicians go on discriminating. Individual form, reality, thought construction. These are only a mental disturbance. Transcending all this, my sons and daughters will walk where there is no discrimination. As a mirage in the air, the thought of water is cherished where there is no water. So things are seen by the ignorant, otherwise than by the wise. The insight of the wise, who move about in the realm of imagelessness, is pure, is born of the triple emancipation, is released from birth and destruction. Where all things are wiped away, even a state of imagelessness ceases to exist for the yogins. In the sameness of existence and non-existence, the fruit of wisdom is born to the wise. How does the sameness take place? When the mind fails to understand the truth, there is disturbance inside, and outside, and in the middle. With the cessation of the disturbance, the mind sees the sameness. Further, Mahamati said, it is told by the Blessed One, again, that true knowledge is gained independent of any object supporting it, and whatever statements one makes about it are no more than thought construction, and that as this thought construction is not to be seized as real, the seizing act of the seizer itself ceases. And when there is thus no seizing, knowledge which is known as discrimination no more evolves. Now, Blessed One, how is transcendental knowledge unobtainable? Is it unattainable because of our not recognizing the generality and individuality of things, their pluralities, their unities? Or is it unattainable because such ideas as individuality, generality, multiplicity, and self-nature overpower one another? Or is it unattainable because of the obstructions presented by a wall, a mountain, an earthwork, a rampart, or by earth, wind, water, or fire? Or because of remoteness or nearness? Or does the knowledge fail to obtain its object of cognition because of the imperfection of the sense organs due to youth, age, or blindness? If, Blessed One, knowledge was not obtainable because of our not recognizing individuality, generality, unity, and plurality, then, Blessed One, such cannot be transcendental knowledge. It is to be called ignorance, for in spite of the fact that objects to be known are before us, we do not know them. Again, if knowledge is unobtainable because such ideas as individuality, generality, multiplicity, and self-nature overpower one another, such is ignorance. Blessed One, it is not transcendental knowledge. Where there is something to be known, Blessed One, knowledge evolves. Where there is nothing, none evolves. Knowledge is possible only where there is a correspondence with that which is known. Again, if knowledge is unobtainable because of the obstruction presented by a wall, mountain, earthwork, rampart, or by earth, water, wind, or fire, or due to farness or nearness, or on account of the imperfection of the sense organs, as in the case of an infant, the aged, and the blind, such as is unattainable is not transcendental knowledge. It is ignorance, for the object to be known is there, but the knowing faculty is lacking. Said the Blessed One, Mahamati, such knowledge as is unattainable is not ignorance. Such is transcendental knowledge. Mahamati, it is not ignorance. It is not because of the deeper sense that I say this, but when we know that there is knowledge gained independent of any supporting object, whatever statements we make about it are no more than thought constructions. That transcendental knowledge is unobtainable is due to the recognition that there is nothing in the world but what is seen of the mind, and that these external objects to which being and non-being are predicated are non-existent. As this knowledge is unobtainable, there is no evolving of knowing and known, and as thus the triple emancipation is realized, there is unattainable knowledge which is transcendental. But logicians, being under the habit energy of the wrong reasoning which has been carried out since beginningless time as to existence and non-existence, are unable to know all this, and, while not knowing it, they are concerned with such notions as external objects, substances, forms, indications, existence, and non-existence. And yet they declare that the cessation of discrimination is the state of the mind only. As they are tenaciously clinging to the thought of an ego soul and all that belongs to it, they are really unable to understand what is meant by the doctrine of mind only, and they go on discriminating, knowing, and known. And because they're discriminating knowing and known, they think of things as existent and non-existent. And declaring that transcendental knowledge is unobtainable, they abide in nihilism. So it is said. If transcendental knowledge fails to see an objective world which lies before it, such is ignorance and not knowledge. This teaching belongs to the logicians. If transcendental knowledge fails to see, through various obstructions far and near, its own unique object that does not present itself as an object, such is to be called wrong knowledge. If transcendental knowledge fails to know, on account of defective senses such as infancy, old age, and blindness, its own object, which is present, such is to be called wrong knowledge. Further, Mahamati, the ignorant and simple-minded keep on dancing and leaping, fascinated with their wrong reasonings, falsehoods, and self-discriminations, and are unable to understand the truth of self-realization and its discourse in words. Clinging to the external world which is seen of the mind itself, they cling to the study of the discourses, which are a means, and do not know properly how to ascertain the truth of self-realization, which is the truth unspoiled by the fourfold proposition. Said Mahamati, Blessed One, it is just as you say. Pray tell me, Blessed One, about the characteristic features of the truth of self-realization, and about the discourses on it, whereby I and other Bodhisattva Mahasattvas in future time, understanding what they are, may keep ourselves away from the wrong logicians, such as the philosophers, and those who belong to the vehicles of the Shravaka and Pratyeka Buddha. Said the Blessed One, Then, Mahamati, listen well, and reflect within yourself. I will tell you. Certainly, Blessed One, said Mahamati the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, and gave ear to the Blessed One. The Blessed One said this to him, Mahamati, there are two forms of teaching the truth attained by the Tathagatas, Arhats, fully enlightened ones, of the past, present, and future. They are the teaching by discourses, and the teaching by the establishment of self-realization. What is meant by the studying of the discourses is this, Mahamati. There are various materials and canonical texts and discourses by which sentient beings are taught according to their dispositions and inclinations. What then is the truth of self-realization by which the yogins turn away from discriminating what is seen of the mind itself? There is an exalted state of inner attainment which does not fall into the dualism of oneness and otherness, of bothness and not bothness, which goes beyond the citta, manas, and manovijnana, which has nothing to do with logic, reasoning, theorizing, and illustrating, which has never been tasted by any bad logicians, by the philosophers, Shravakas, and Pradyeka Buddhas, who have fallen into the dualistic views of being and non-being. This I call self-realization. This, Mahamati, is what characterizes the truth of self-realization and discoursing on it. And in this you and the other Bodhisattva Mahasattvas are to discipline themselves. So it is said, I have two forms of teaching the truth, self-realization and discoursing. I discourse with the ignorant and disclose self-realization to the yogins. At that time, again, Mahamati, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said this to the Blessed One. It was told at one time by the Blessed One, the Tathagata, the Arhat, the fully enlightened one, that the Lokyatika, who is skilled in various forms of incantation and in the art of eloquence, is not to be honored, adored, and reverently attended upon. For what one gains from such devotions is worldly enjoyments, and not the Dharma, or truth. For what reason is this said, Blessed One, that by devoting ourselves to the Lokayatika, who is skilled in varieties of incantations and in the art of eloquence, worldly enjoyments are gained, but not the Dharma, or truth? Said the Blessed One, the Lokayatika, who is skilled in varieties of incantations and in the art of eloquence, Mahamati, puts the minds of the ignorant in utter confusion by means of various reasonings, by clever manipulation of words and phrases, and what he teaches being the mere prattle of a child as far as one can make out is not at all in accordance with truth, nor in unison with sense. For this reason, Mahamati, the Lokayatika, is said to be skilled in varieties of incantations and in the art of eloquence. He attracts the ignorant by making clever use of various words, but he never leads them to the way of truth and right teaching. As he himself does not understand what all things mean, he puts the minds of the ignorant into utter confusion by his dualistic views, thus ruining himself. Not being released of the transition from one path to another, not understanding that there is nothing but what is seen of the mind itself, and attaching himself to the idea of self-nature in external things, the Lokayatika knows no deliverance from discrimination. For this reason, Mahamati, the Lokayatika, who is clever in various incantations and in the art of eloquence, being thus never emancipated from such calamities as birth, age, disease, sorrow, lamentation, pain, and despair, leads the ignorant into bewilderment by means of various words, phrases, reasons, examples, and conclusions. Mahamati, Indra was a brilliant Lokayatika, whose knowledge made him master of many treatises, and who was himself the author of a work on sound. He had a disciple who, assuming the body of a serpent, went up to heaven and got into the society of the god Indra. Making up a thesis, he challenged the god. Either your 1,000-spoked chariot be smashed to pieces, or every one of my own serpent hoods be cut off. In the argument, the Lokayatika disciple who had assumed the form of a serpent defeated the god opponent, whereupon the 1,000-spoked chariot was smashed to pieces. The disciple then came down again to this world. In such a way, Mahamati, the Lokayatika has a system composed of various reasonings and exemplifications, and, knowing well even the minds of the animal world, puts the gods and fighting demons in utter confusion by means of various words and phrases. He then makes them tenaciously adhere to the notion of coming and going. How much more human beings? For this reason, Mahamati, the Lokayatika is to be shunned, for he carries with him the cause leading to the birth of pain. No homage, no reverence, no service is to be shown to him. Mahamati, the attainment of the Lokayatika does not go beyond the realm of the body and knowledge belonging to it. Though he may explain his materialism by using varieties of words and phrases amounting to 100,000. But in after times, after 500 years, divisions will take place among his followers, leading them to wrong reasonings and demonstrations. Divisions will abound because of this, not being able to hold disciples. Thus, Mahamati, materialism splitting into many parties and adhering to varieties of reasonings is explained by the philosophers, each of whom clings to his way of reasoning, as he knows no truth existing by itself. While this is not at all the case with all philosophers who have their own treatises and doctrines, materialism is asserted under various disguises, which are explained by 100,000 different methods. There is in them also no truth existing by itself, and they do not recognize that theirs is materialism because of their stupidity. Said Mahamati, if all the philosophers teach materialism by means of various words, phrases, examples, and conclusions, which are not the truth as it is, but are their own selfish assertions tenaciously maintained, does not the Blessed One, too, teach materialism by means of various words and phrases to the assemblages of the gods, demons, and human beings who come from various countries? Materialism which is not the truth of self-realization, but is something like the discourses of all the philosophers? The Blessed One said, I do not teach materialism, nor coming and going, but I teach, Mahamati, that which is not coming and going. Now, Mahamati, coming means production and mass. It is born of accumulation. Going, Mahamati, means destruction. That which is not coming and going is designated unborn. Mahamati, I do not teach anything approaching the discrimination of the philosophers. For what reason? Because there are no external objects. There is nothing to get attached to. When one abides in mind only, beyond which there is no external world, dualism ceases. As there is no realm of form based on discrimination, one comes to recognize that there is nothing but what is seen of the mind itself. And for these reasons, the discrimination of what is seen of the mind itself does not take place. Owing to the cessation of discrimination, one enters into the triple emancipation, where is the state of no form, emptiness, and effortlessness. Hence it is called deliverance. I remember, Mahamati, when I was staying in a certain place, a Brahmin Lokayatika approached where I was, and having approached, suddenly asked me, saying, Gautama, is all created? I said to him, Brahmin, if all is created, this is the first school of materialism. Gautama, is all uncreated? Brahmin, if all is uncreated, this is the second school of materialism. Thus, to state that all is non-eternal, or that all is eternal, or that all is born, or that all is unborn, this, Brahman, is the sixth school of materialism. Again, Mahamati, the Brahmin Lokayatika said this to me, Gautama, is all one? Is all different? Is all characterized with bothness? Is all characterized with not bothness? Is all to be regarded as subject to causation, since all is seen as born of varieties of causes? This, Brahman, is the 10th school of materialism. Again, Gautama, is all explainable? Is all unexplainable? Is there an ego soul? Is there no ego soul? Is this world real? Is this world not real? Is there another world? Is there no other world? Is another world existent or non-existent? Is there emancipation? Is there no emancipation? Is all momentary? Is all not momentary? Are space, annihilation taking place without premeditation, and nirvana, O Gautama, are they created or uncreated? Is there a middle existence? Is there no middle existence? I then said this to him, Mahamati. If so, Brahman, this is materialism. It is not mine. O Brahman, it is your worldly philosophy. I explain, Brahman, that the triple world has its cause in the habit energy of discrimination going on since beginningless time on account of error and wrong reasoning. For discrimination takes place, Brahman, because it is not recognized that there is no external world but the mind itself, and not because an external world is seen as object of cognition. According to the philosophers, there is a triple accordance of an ego soul, sense organs, and an objective world. But such is not mine. Brahman, I do not belong to the school of causation, nor to the school of no causation, except that I teach the chain of origination as far as the thought-constructed world of grasped and grasping exists, depending on discrimination. This is not understood by you and others who cherish the notion of an ego soul and its continuity. Mahamate, space, nirvana, and causation exist in enumeration. As realities, they are unobtainable. Hence the question whether they are created or not requires no answering. Again, Mahamate, the Brahmin Lokayatika said this: Is the triple world to be regarded as caused by ignorance, desire, and action, or is it causeless? Brahman, this twofold question again belongs to materialism. Gautama, are all things to be conceived under the aspect of individuality and generality? This too, Brahman, belongs to materialism. So long as there is a mental perturbation which makes one cling to an objective world of discrimination, there is materialism. Further, Mahamate, this Brahman materialist said this to me: Gautama, is there any philosophy that is not of the world? All the truth that is taught by all the philosophers, by means of varieties of words and phrases, by means of reasons, examples, and conclusions, by general consent, Gautama, belongs to me. Brahman, there is something that does not belong to you, though it is not beyond the truth of general consent, nor independent of varieties of words and phrases, and further, it is not out of accord with reason. The Brahma asked, Is there any philosophy that is not of the world and yet belongs to the general opinion of the world? Brahman, there is that which does not belong to materialism, and which is not reached by your wisdom, nor by that of the philosophers who cling to false discriminations and wrong reasonings, as they fail to see the unreality of external objects. By this is meant the cessation of discrimination. When it is recognized that there is nothing beyond what is seen of the mind itself, the discrimination of being and non-being ceases. As thus there is no external world as the object of perception, discrimination abides in its own abode. This is not a materialism. It belongs to me. It does not belong to you. By abiding in its own abode is meant that it ceases to evolve. As discrimination is no more born, it is said to have ceased to evolve. This, Brahman, is not of materialism. In short, Brahman, if there is any coming and going of the Vijnanas, a vanishing and appearing, a solicitation, an attachment, an intense affection, a philosophical view, a theory, an abode, a touch, the clinging of various signs, assemblage, continuity, desire, and attachment to cause, this, Brahman, is materialism of yours, but not mine. Mahamate, I was thus questioned by the Brahmin materialist who came to me, and when he was thus sent off, he silently departed. At that time, there came to the Blessed One the king of the Nagas, called Krishna Pakashaka, who assumed the body of a Brahmin, and said thus: Gautama, is there not another world? Now, young man, whence do you come? Gautama, I am come from the White Isle. Brahmin, that is another world. The young man thus refuted and put to silence made himself invisible without asking me anything about my own teaching, which stands in opposition to his. He thought within himself, "This son of the Sakyas stands outside of my own system. He is a pitiable fellow. He belongs to the school which holds the cessation of signs and causes. He talks of the cessation of discrimination, which will take place when there is a cognition of an external world as something seen of one's own discrimination." And, Mahamate, you too ask me how, for one who serves the Lokayatika, skilled in various incantations and in the art of eloquence, there are worldly enjoyments and not the attainment of the Dharma. Said Mahamate, "What is meant, Blessed One, by the words, the objects of worldly enjoyment, and the Dharma?" Said the Blessed One, well said, Mahamate. You have thought deeply about this twofold meaning, having in view present and future generations. Then, Mahamate, listen well and reflect within yourself. I will tell you. Certainly, Blessed One, said Mahamate the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, and gave ear to the Blessed One. The Blessed One said this to him. What is meant by a worldly object of enjoyment, Mahamate? It means that which can be touched, attracted by, wiped off, handled, and tasted. It is that which makes one get attached to an external world, enter into a dualism on account of a wrong view, and appear again in the skandhas, where, owing to the procreative force of desire, there arise all kinds of disaster, such as birth, age, disease, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, despair, etc. This is called the object of worldly enjoyment by myself and other Buddhas. This, Mahamate, is the attainment of worldly enjoyments, and not that of the truth. It is materialism, which one learns by serving the Lokayatika. Mahamate, what is meant by the attainment of the Dharma, or truth? When the truth of self-mind and the twofold egolessness are understood, and further, when the nature of the egolessness of things and persons is seen into, discrimination ceases to assert itself. When the various stages of bodhisattvahood are thoroughly perceived one after another, the citta, manas, and manovijnana are turned away. And when one enters upon the path of baptism by the wisdom of all the Buddhas and takes hold of the 10 inexhaustible vows, one becomes sovereign master of all things by virtue of a life of effortlessness. Hence it is called the Dharma, as one is thereby released from all philosophical views, unsound reasonings, discriminations, and dualistic notions. As a rule, Mahamate, the philosophical views lead the ignorant, though not the wise, to a dualism, that is, to nihilism and eternalism. Eternalism rises from embracing a doctrine of no causation, while nihilism rises from believing in the annihilation of causal conditions and in the non-existence of a cause. I teach, however, the Dharma so-called, which is subject to the conditions of rising, abiding, and destruction. This, Mahamate, is the conclusion with regard to worldly enjoyment and the Dharma. So it is said, beings are subdued by the reception and are brought into subjection by the moral precepts, or sila. They are removed from philosophical views by transcendental knowledge, or prajna, and are nourished by the emancipations. All that is taught by the philosophers to no purpose is materialism. Where the realistic view of cause and effect is cherished, there is no self-realization. I teach to my group of disciples one self-realization which has nothing to do with causes and effect, being free from materialism. There is nothing but that which is seen of the mind itself. The duality, too, is of the mind. While existence is observed and divided into the grasp and grasping, it has nothing to do with eternalism or nihilism. As long as mentation goes on, there is materialism. When there is no rising of discrimination, the world is seen as of mind itself. Coming means the originating of the objective world as effect, and going is the not seeing of the effect. When one thoroughly understands the coming and going, discrimination ceases. Eternity and non-eternity, the made and not made, this world and that world, all these and other ideas belong to materialism. At that time again, Mahamate, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said this to the Blessed One. Nirvana. Nirvana is talked of by the Blessed One. What does this term designate? What is the nirvana that is discriminated by all the philosophers? Said the Blessed One. Then, Mahamate, listen well and reflect well within yourself. I will tell you. Certainly, Blessed One, said Mahamate the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, and gave ear to the Blessed One. The Blessed One said this to him. As to such nirvanas as are discriminated by the philosophers, there are really none in existence. Some philosophers conceive nirvana to be found where a system of mentation no more operates owing to the cessation of the skandhas, dhatus, and ayatanas, or to the indifference to the objective world, or to the recognition that all things are impermanent, or where there is no recollection of the past and present, just as when a lamp is extinguished, or when a seed is burnt, or when a fire goes out, because then there is the cessation of all the substrate, which is explained by the philosophers as the non-arising of discrimination. But, Mahamate, nirvana does not consist in mere annihilation. Again, some explain deliverance by going to another quarter and abode, as when a wind stops blowing, when the discrimination of objects ceases. Again, some philosophers explain deliverance by the getting rid of the dualistic view of knower and known. Some conceive deliverance to be the cessation of discrimination where one sees permanence and impermanence. Again, some explain the discrimination of various forms as the bearer of pain, and yet not understanding that there is nothing but what is seen of the mind itself, are alarmed by the notion of form, and seek their happiness in formlessness. In this they cherish the notion of nirvana. Again, some conceive this to be nirvana, namely, that in consideration of generality and individuality recognizable in all things inner and outer, they are never destroyed, maintaining their being throughout the past, present, and future. Again, some conceive that nirvana is an ego soul, a being, a vital force, a nourisher, a supreme spirit, and the indestructibility of all things. Again, Mahamate, some philosophers, owing to their foolishness, declare this to be nirvana, namely, that there is a primary substance, there is a supreme soul, and they are seen differently by each, and that they produce all things from the transformations of the qualities. Some conceive nirvana to consist of the extinction of merit and demerit, some in the destruction of the passions by means of knowledge, some in regarding Isvara as the free creator of the world. Some think that the world is born of interaction and that there is no special cause other than this cause, and clinging to it they have no awakening because of stupidity, and they conceive nirvana to consist in this non-awakening. Again, Mahamate, some philosophers conceive nirvana to be the attaining of the true path. Some cherish the thought of nirvana as where there is the union of qualities and their owner, from which there is oneness and otherness, bothness and not bothness. Some imagine that nirvana is where they see the self-nature of things, existing all by its own nature, such as the variegated feathers of the peacock, variously formed precious stones, or the pointedness of a thorn. Some, Mahamate, conceive nirvana in the recognition of the 25 tattvas, or truths. Some in the king's observance of the teaching of the 6 virtues. Some, seeing that time is a creator and that the rise of the world depends on time, conceive that nirvana consists in recognizing this fact. Again, Mahamate, some conceive being to be nirvana. Some non-being, while some conceive that all things and nirvana are not to be distinguished one from another. All these views of nirvana, severally advanced by the philosophers with their reasonings, are not in accord with logic, nor are they acceptable to the wise. Mahamate, they all conceive nirvana dualistically and in a causal connection. By these discriminations, Mahamate, all philosophers imagine nirvana, but there is nothing arising, nothing disappearing here, and there is no room for discrimination. Mahamate, each philosopher, relying on his own textbook, from which he draws his understanding and intelligence, examines the subject and sins against the truth, because the truth is not such as is imagined by him. His reasoning ends in setting the mind to wandering about and becoming confused, as nirvana is not to be found anywhere. Again, Mahamate, there are others who, roaring with their all-knowledge as a lion's roar, explain nirvana in the following way. That is, nirvana is where it is recognized that there is nothing but what is seen of the mind itself, where there is no attachment to external objects, existent or non-existent, where, getting rid of the four propositions, there is an insight into the abode of reality as it is, where, recognizing the nature of the self-mind, one does not cherish the dualism of discrimination, where grasped and grasping are no more obtainable, where all logical measures are not seized upon, as it is realized that they never assert themselves, where the idea of truth is not adhered to, but treated with indifference because of its causing a bewilderment, where, by the attainment of the exalted Dharma which lies within the inmost recesses of one's being, the two forms of egolessness are recognized, the two forms of passions subsided, and the two kinds of hindrance cleared away, where the stages of bodhisattvahood are passed, one after another, until the stage of tathagatahood is attained, in which all the samadhis, beginning with the Maya-like, are realized, and the citta, manas, and manavijnana are put away. Here, indeed, they say nirvana is to be found. Nirvana is severally conceived by the philosophers, but theirs is no more than imagination. It is not the way of emancipation. Released of bound and binding and free from all expediencies, the philosophers imagine they are emancipated, but emancipation is not to be found there. Divided into many a school are the systems of the philosophers. There is thus no emancipation in them, because of their imagination stupidity carried on. Wrongly imbued with the idea of cause and effect, all the philosophers are beguiled, and theirs is thus no emancipation for them who are of the dualistic school of being and non-being. The ignorant are delighted with discoursing and false reasoning, but they are unable to raise any great intelligence toward truth or tattva. Discoursing is a source of suffering in the triple world, while truth is the extinguisher of suffering. Like an image seen in a mirror, which is not real, the mind is seen by the ignorant in a dualistic form, in the mirror of habit energy. When it is not thoroughly understood that there is nothing but what is seen of the mind itself, dualistic discriminations take place. When it is thoroughly understood that there is nothing but what is seen of the mind itself, discrimination ceases. Mind is no other than multiplicity, and yet it is devoid of qualified and qualifying. Forms are visible, but not in the way as seen discriminated by the ignorant. The triple world is no other than discrimination. There are no external objects. Discrimination sees multiplicity. This is not understood by the ignorant. The truth is told differently, discriminated in the different sutras, because of names and notions. Yet apart from words, no meaning is attainable. At that time, Mahamati, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said this to the Blessed One. Tell me, Blessed One, Tathagata, Arhat, fully enlightened one, concerning the self-nature of Buddhahood, whereby I and other Bodhisattva Mahasattvas, understanding well what constitutes the self-nature of the Tathagata, may have both ourselves and others awakened in the truth. The Blessed One said, Then, Mahamate, ask me as you desire, according to which I will answer. Mahamate replied, Blessed One, is the Tathagata, the Arhat, the fully enlightened one, to be considered unmade or made, an effect or a cause, predicated or predicating, an expression of that which is expressed, knowledge or that which is knowable? Is the Blessed One different from all these expressions or not? If the Tathagata, Arhat, fully enlightened one, is to be described by those expressions, he is neither made nor unmade, neither an effect nor a cause. Why? Because the error of dualism would be here committed. If, Mahamate, the Tathagata is something made, he is impermanent. If he is impermanent, anything made would be a Tathagata, which is not desired by myself and other Tathagatas. If he is something unmade, his self-essence being attainment, all the preparations brought forward for the realization of Tathagatahood will be useless, like a hare's horns or a barren woman's child, because of their never having been made. That which is neither an effect nor a cause, Mahamate, is neither a being nor a non-being, and that which is neither a being nor a non-being is outside the four propositions. The four propositions, Mahamate, belong to worldly usage. That which is outside the four propositions is no more than a word, like a barren woman's child. Mahamate, a barren woman's child is a mere word and is beyond the four propositions. As it is beyond them, the wise know it to be not subject to measurement. So is the meaning of all the terms concerning the Tathagata to be understood by the wise. It is told by me that all things are egoless. By this is meant, Mahamate, that they are devoid of selfhood. Hence, this is egolessness. What I mean is that all things have each its own individuality, which does not belong to another, as in the case of a cow and a horse. For example, Mahamate, the being of a cow is not of horse nature, nor is the being of a horse of cow nature. This exemplifies the case of neither being nor non-being. Each of them is not without its own individuality. Each is such as it is by its own nature. In the same way, Mahamate, things are not each without its own individuality, yet they are such as they are. And thus the ignorant and simple-minded fail to understand the signification of egolessness by reason of their discrimination. Indeed, they are not free from discrimination. The same is to be known exactly about all things being empty, unborn, and without self-nature. In the same way, the Tathagata and the Skandhas are neither not different nor different. If he is not different from the Skandhas, he is impermanent, as the Skandhas are something made. If they are different, they are two separate entities. The case is like a cow's horns. As they look alike, they are not different. As the one is short and the other long, they are different. This can be said of all things. Mahamate, the right horn of a cow is thus different from her left horn. So is the left from the right. The one is longer or shorter than the other. The same can be said of varieties of colors. Thus, the Tathagata and the Skandhas are neither different nor not different from one another. In the same way, the Tathagata is neither different nor not different from emancipation. He can be described in terms of emancipation. If the Tathagata is different from emancipation, he partakes in the nature of a material object. If he does, he is impermanent. If he is not different, there will be no distinction in the attainments of the yogins, and, Mahamate, a distinction is seen in the yogins. Therefore, the Tathagata is neither different nor not different from emancipation. In the same way, knowledge is neither different nor not different from that which is known. That Mahamate which is neither eternal nor not eternal, neither effect nor cause, neither effect producing nor not effect producing, neither knowledge nor that which is knowable, neither predicated nor not predicating, neither the skandhas nor not different from the skandhas, neither that which is expressed nor expression, nor bound up with oneness and otherness, with bothness and not bothness. This is something removed from all measurement. That which is removed from all measurement is not expressible in words. That which is not expressible is something unborn. That which is unborn is not subject to destruction. That which is not subject to destruction is like space. And, Mahamate, space is neither an effect nor a cause. That which is neither an effect nor a cause is something unconditioned. That which is unconditioned goes beyond all idle reasonings. That which goes beyond all idle reasonings, that is the Tathagata. Mahamate, this is the essence of perfect enlightenment. This is the self-nature of Buddhahood, which is removed from all senses and measurements. So it is said. That which is released from senses and measurement is neither an effect nor a cause. It has nothing to do with knowledge and that which is to be known. It is free from predicated and predicating. There is something which is nowhere to be seen by anybody as the skandhas, causation, enlightenment. Of that which is nowhere to be seen by anybody, what description can we make? It is not something made nor unmade. It is neither an effect nor a cause. It is neither the skandhas nor not skandhas, nor is it other than the combination. There is something that is not to be seen by the discrimination of its being, nor is it to be known as non-existent. Such is the self-essence of all things. Accompanied by being, there is non-being. Accompanied by non-being, there is being. As thus non-being is not to be known by itself, being is not to be discriminated. Those who cling to mere words, not knowing what is meant by an ego-soul and egolessness, are immersed in dualism. They are corrupted and lead the ignorant to corruption. When they see my religion liberated from all detriments, they behold properly. They do not defile the world leaders. At that time again, Mahamati, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said this to the Blessed One. Tell me, Blessed One, tell me, Sugata. Mention is made in the canonical books of the Blessed One's being subject neither to birth nor to destruction. And it is declared by you that this being subject neither to birth nor to destruction is an epithet of the Tathagata. Now, Blessed One, by this being subject neither to birth nor to destruction is a non-entity meant. And is it another name for the Tathagata, as is declared by the Blessed One? It is taught by the Blessed One that all things are subject neither to birth nor to destruction, because they are not to be seen in the dualistic aspect of being and non-being. If all things are unborn, Blessed One, no one can take hold of anything, because nothing has ever been born. And if that is another name of something, what can this something be, Blessed One? The Blessed One said, Then, Mahamate, listen well and reflect well within yourself. I will tell you. Certainly, Blessed One, said Mahamati the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, and gave ear to the Blessed One. The Blessed One said this to him, Mahamate, the Tathagata is not a non-entity, nor is he to be conceived as all things are, as neither born nor disappearing, nor is he to look around for causation in order to appear before others, nor is he without signification. I refer to him as unborn. Nevertheless, Mahamate, there is another name for the Tathagata when his Dharmakaya assumes a will body. This is what goes beyond the comprehension of the philosophers, Shravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, and those bodhisattvas still abiding in the seventh stage. The unborn Mahamate is synonymous with the Tathagata. For instance, Mahamate, Indra is sometimes known as Sakra, sometimes as Purandara. Hand is Hasta, Kara, Pani. The body is Tanu, Deha, Sarira. The earth is Prithivi, Bhumi, Vasundhara. The sky is Ka, Akasa, Gajana. All these objects, each in its way, are designated with many names, synonymously used and discriminated. But on account of these different names, different objects are not to be imagined, nor are they without their self-nature. The same Mahamate can be said of myself, for I come within the range of hearing of ignorant people in this world of patience under many names, amounting to 100,000 times 3 asamkayayas, and they address me by these names, not knowing that they are all other names of the Tathagata. Of these, Mahamate, some recognize me as the Tathagata, some as the self-existent one, some as leader, as Vinayaka or remover, as Parinayaka or guide, as Buddha, as Rishi or ascetic, as Bull King, as Brahma, as Vishnu, as Isvara, as original source or Pradhana, as Kapila, as Bhutana or end of reality, as Arishta, as Namina, as Soma or moon, as the sun, as Rama, as Vyasa, as Sukha, as Indra, as Balin, as Varuna, as is known to some, while others recognize me as one who is never born and never passes away, as emptiness, as suchness, as truth, as reality, as limit of reality, as the Dharma Dhatu, as Nirvana, as the eternal, as sameness, as non-duality, as the undying, as the formless, as causation, as the doctrine of Buddha cause, as emancipation, as the truth of the path, as the all-knower, as the victor, as the will-made mind. Mahamate, thus in full possession of the 100,000 times 3 asamkayayas of appellations, neither more nor less, in this world and in other worlds, I am known to the peoples, like the moon in water, which is neither in it nor out of it. But this is not understood by the ignorant, who have fallen into the dualistic conception of continuity. Though they honor, praise, esteem, and revere me, they do not understand well the meaning of words and definitions. They do not distinguish ideas. They do not have their own truth, and, clinging to the words of the canonical books, they imagine that not being subject to birth and destruction means a non-entity, and they fail to see that it is one of the many names of the Tathagata, as in the case of Indra, Sakra, Purandara. They have no confidence in the texts where the self-standing truth is revealed, since in their study of all things they follow mere words as expressions in the texts, trying thereby to gain into the meaning. Thus, Mahamate, these deluded ones would declare that as words are, so is meaning, that meaning is not otherwise than words. For what reason? Because meaning has no body of its own and cannot be different from words. That the unintelligent declare words to be identical with meaning is due to their ignorance as to the self-nature of words. They do not know, Mahamate, that words are subject to birth and death, whereas meaning is not. Mahamate, words are dependent on letters, but meaning is not. As meaning is freed from existence and non-existence, it is not born. It has no substratum. And Mahamate, the Tathagatas do not teach the doctrine that is dependent upon letters. As to letters, their being or non-being is not attainable. It is otherwise with the thought that is never dependent upon letters. Again, Mahamate, anyone that discourses on a truth that is dependent on letters is a mere prattler, because truth is beyond letters. For this reason, Mahamate, it is declared in the canonical text by myself and other Buddhas and Bodhisattvas that not a letter is uttered or answered by the Tathagatas. For what reason? Because truths are not dependent on letters. It is not that they never declare what is in conformity with meaning. When they declare anything, it is according to the discrimination of all beings. If, Mahamate, the truth is not declared in words, the scriptures containing all truths will disappear. And when the scriptures disappear, there will be no Buddhas, Shravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas. And when there is no one to teach, what is to be taught, and to whom? For this reason, then, Mahamate, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva is not to become attached to the words of the canonical texts. Mahamate, owing to the functioning of the minds of sentient beings, the canonical texts sometimes deviate from their straightforward course. Religious discourses are given by myself and other Tathagatas, arhats, fully enlightened ones, in response to varieties of faiths on the part of beings, in order to remove them from the bondage of the Sita, Manas, and Manovijnana, and not for the attainment and establishment of self-realization, which issues from noble wisdom. When there is the recognition of the fact that all things are characterized with imagelessness, and that there is nothing in the world but what is seen of the mind itself, there is the discarding of the dualistic discrimination. Therefore, Mahamate, let the Bodhisattva Mahasattva be in conformity with the meaning, and not with the letter. Mahamate, a son or daughter of a good family who conforms himself or herself to the letter will ruin his or her understanding of ultimate reality and will cause others to fail to recognize the truth. Continuing to cherish wrong views, one's own assertion is confounded by the philosophers who do not understand well what characterizes all the stages of the Dharma and who have no adequate knowledge as to the interpretation of words. If they well understand what characterizes all the stages of the Dharma, and are adequately equipped with the interpretation of words and expressions, and have a good understanding of the meaning and reason of all things, they will properly enjoy by themselves the bliss of formlessness, while others are properly established in the Mahayana. Being properly embraced in the Mahayana, they will, Mahamate, be in the embrace of the Buddhas, Shravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas. Being embraced by the Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Pratyeka Buddhas, and Shravakas, they will in turn embrace all beings. Embracing all beings, they will embrace the good Dharma. The good Dharma being embraced, the Buddha seeds will not be destroyed. When the Buddha seeds are not destroyed, the excellent abodes will be attained. When thus these excellent abodes are attained, Mahamate, the Bodhisattva Mahasattvas will see to it that all beings, being established in the Mahayana, are born there in the excellent abodes, and fortifying themselves with the tenfold supernatural power, and assuming various forms, they will discourse on the Dharma in conformity to its true nature, and with a thorough knowledge of various wishes and characteristics of beings. Now, the true nature of things is characterized by non-differentiation and trueness. It is neither coming nor departing. It puts a stop to all idle reasonings, and it is called the truth. Therefore, Mahamate, let a son or daughter of a good family take good heed not to get attached to words as being in perfect conformity with meaning, because the truth is not of the letter. Be not like the one who looks at the fingertip. For instance, Mahamate, when a man with his fingertip points at something, to somebody the fingertip may be taken wrongly for the thing pointed at. In like manner, Mahamate, the people belonging to the class of the ignorant and simple-minded, like those of a childish group, are unable even unto their death to abandon the idea that in the fingertip of words there is the meaning itself, and will not grasp ultimate reality because of their intent clinging to words which are no more than the fingertip to them. To give another illustration, Mahamate, boiled rice is the proper food for infants, to whom, suppose, somebody gave uncooked food to eat. In this case, this one is to be considered to be out of his sense, because of his not knowing how to prepare food properly. So it is with that which is neither born nor destroyed, Mahamate. It will not manifest itself to anybody unless he is well disciplined in it. Therefore, you should most assuredly discipline yourself in this, and not be like one who, grasping his own fingertip, sees the meaning there. For this reason, Mahamate, you should energetically discipline yourself to get at the meaning itself. Mahamate, the meaning is alone with itself, and is the cause of nirvana. Words are bound up with discrimination, and are the carrier of transmigration. Meaning, Mahamate, is attained from much learning, and this much learning, Mahamate, means to be conversant with meaning and not with words. To be conversant with meaning means to ascertain the view which is not at all associated with any philosophical school, and which will keep not only yourself but others from falling into the false views. Being so, Mahamate, this is said to be learned much in meaning. Therefore, let seekers for meaning reverently approach those who are much learned in it. But those who are attached to words as being in accord with meaning, they are to be left to themselves, and to be shunned by truth-seekers. Further, Mahamate, to whom the Buddha's spiritual powers were added, said, "There is nothing specially distinguishable in the Buddha's teaching of no birth and no annihilation. Why? Because all the philosophers also declare, Blessed One, their causes to be unborn and not to be annihilated. And you too, Blessed One, declare space, annihilation, and nirvana to be unborn and not to be annihilated. The philosophers declare, Blessed One, that the world rises from causal agencies and causation, while the Blessed One too declares that the world takes its rise from ignorance, desire, deed, discrimination, which work in accordance with the law of causation. Both thus refer to causation, the difference being in names only. So, with the rise of external objects, both you and they assume external causation. Thus, there is no distinction between your teaching, Blessed One, and that of the philosophers. With them, there are 9 substances which are regarded as unborn and not to be annihilated: atoms, Supreme Soul, Isvara, Creator, etc. While, Blessed One, you assert that all things are neither born nor annihilated, as their being and non-being is unattainable. Now, as the elements are indestructible, their self-nature is neither born nor annihilated. While following various courses of transformation, what constitutes their essential nature is not abandoned. Though your notion of the elements may differ in form, Blessed One, it is what has been imagined by all the philosophers as well as by yourself. For this reason, this teaching of yours has nothing distinctive. If there is anything distinctive by which the teaching of the Tathagata excels that of the philosophers, pray tell me. Blessed One, if there is nothing distinctive in your own teaching, we can say that there is something of Buddhahood in the teaching of all the philosophers, because in them there is a cause pointing to no birth and no annihilation. It was declared by the Blessed One that many Tathagatas are not born simultaneously in the same district in one world. But if the rule of cause and effect with regard to being and non-being holds true, and your own teaching leaves nothing contradicting behind, there must be many Tathagatas rising at the same time and in the same locality. The Blessed One said, Mahamate, my teaching of no birth and no annihilation is not like that of the philosophers who also speak of no birth and no annihilation, nor is it like their doctrine of birth and impermanency. Why? Because, Mahamate, that to which the philosophers ascribe the characteristics of no birth and no change is the self-nature of all things. But mine is not that which falls into the dualism of being and non-being. Mine, Mahamate, goes beyond the dualism of being and non-being, has nothing to do with birth, abiding, and destruction, is neither existent nor non-existent. Multitudinousness of objects is to be seen as like Maya and a dream. I say that it is not non-existent. How is it not existent? Because there are no characteristic signs to be perceived as belonging to the self-nature of things. They are seen in one sense as individual objects, and not seen as such in another sense. Again, they are something in one sense graspable, and in another sense ungraspable. For this reason, things are existent and non-existent. But when it is understood that there is nothing in the world but what is seen of the mind itself, discrimination no more rises, and one is thus established in his own abode, which is the realm of no work. The ignorant work and discriminate, but not the wise. Mahamate, the doings of the ignorant are unrealities discriminated, realities confounded. They are like the city of the Gandharvas, like magically created figures. To illustrate, Mahamate, here is a city of the Gandharvas, where children see magically created people, merchants, and many others going in or coming out, and imagine that they are really people going in and coming out. It is owing to this discrimination characterized by perturbation that such takes place. It is the same, Mahamate, with the ignorant, that they have a confused perception of birth and no birth. There is really nothing made or unmade, like the rising of magically created people. For magically created people are neither born nor annihilated, because there is no question whatever as to their existence or non-existence. In like manner, all things have nothing to do with birth and destruction, except that the ignorant, cherishing false ideas, imagine the birth and annihilation of objects. It is, however, not so with the wise. By false ideas is meant that objects are not judged as they are in themselves. They are nothing else. When reality is discriminated other than it is, there is the clinging to the idea that all things have their self-nature, and what is alone by itself is not seen. And when what is alone by itself is not seen, there is no disappearance of discrimination. For this reason, Mahamate, an insight into formlessness excels, and not an insight into form. As form causes another birth, it excels not. By formlessness, Mahamate, is meant the disappearance of discrimination. No birth and no annihilation. This I call nirvana. By nirvana, Mahamate, is meant the looking into the abode of reality as it really is in itself. And when, along with the turning back of the entire system of mentation, there is the attainment of self-realization by means of noble wisdom, which belongs to the Tathagatas, I call it nirvana. So it is said. In order to remove the notion of birth and to accomplish that of no birth, I teach the doctrine of no cause. But this is not understood by the ignorant. This all is unborn, but that does not mean that there are no objects. They are seen to be like the city of the Gandharvas, a dream and Maya. Objects are here, but causeless. Tell me how things are unborn, without self-nature and empty. When things are seen by transcendental knowledge, they are not subject to combination and are unattainable. Therefore, I declare that they are empty, unborn, and without self-nature. Considered one by one, combination is there. The world appears to exist, but nothing is really existing. It is not as it is conceived by the philosophers. When combination is dissolved, nothing is left to be seen. As is a dream, a hairnet, Maya, the city of the Gandharvas, and a mirage, which rise into view causelessly, so is the multitudinousness of the world. By keeping down the theory of no causation, no birth is demonstrated. When the theory of no birth is declared, my law-I is never destroyed. When the theory of no cause is pointed out, the philosophers are horrified. Mahamate asked, "How? By whom? Where? And wherefore does the theory of no cause make its appearance?" The Blessed One answered, "When things are perceived as neither subject to causation nor above it, then the view maintained by the philosophers of birth and destruction is done away with." Mahamate asked, "Is non-being no birth? Or does it look for causation? Or is it a being's name without a corresponding reality? Pray, tell me." The Blessed One answered, "Non-being is not no birth, nor does it look for causation, nor is it a being's name, nor is it a name without a corresponding object. Here is a reality which does not belong to the Shravakas, Pratyeka-Buddhas, nor to the philosophers. Neither does it belong to the Bodhisattvas who have entered upon the seventh stage. This is what characterizes no birth. The doing away with the notion of cause and condition, the giving up of a causal agency, the establishment of the mind only, this I state to be no birth. The getting rid of the idea that things are caused, the removal of the dualism of imagined and imagining, the being liberated from the alternatives of being and non-being, this I state to be no birth. The mind liberated from its objective world, the getting rid of the twofold svabhava, a turning up at the seat of mentation, this I state to be no birth. No external existence, no non-existence, not even the grasping of mind. Things are like a dream, a hairnet, Maya, the city of Gandharva, a mirage, the abandonment of all the philosophical views. This is what characterizes no birth. Thus, too, all these words will be understood, that is, emptiness, having no self-nature, etc. The world is empty, not indeed because of its being empty, but because of its being empty in the sense of being unborn. A system of mentality may have its rise and fall owing to causation. When there is a dissolution of the system, there is neither birth nor annihilation. When a dissolution somewhere takes place among the members of the system, such existence ceases, as is discriminated by the philosophers by means of such categories as oneness and separateness. Nothing is born. Being is not. Non-being is not. Nowhere is being and non-being, except that where there is a system, there is the rising of things and their dissolution. It is only in accord with general convention that a chain of mutual dependence is talked of. Birth has no sense when the chain of dependence is severed. As there is nothing generating, there is no birth, free from the faults of the philosophers. I talk of this conventionally according to the theory of concatenation, and this is not intelligible to the ignorant. If there is anything born somewhere apart from concatenation, here is one who is to be recognized as an advocate of no causation, as he destroys concatenation. If concatenation works from outside, like a lamp revealing all kinds of things, this means the presence of something outside concatenation itself. All things are devoid of self-nature, have never been born, and in their original nature are like the sky. Things separated from concatenation belong to the discrimination of the ignorant. There is another kind of no-birth, which is the self-essence of things realized by the wise. Its birth is no-birth, and in this no-birth there is a recognition. When this entire world is regarded as concatenation, as nothing else but concatenation, then the mind gains tranquility. Ignorance, desire, karma, etc., these are the inner concatenation. A ladle, clay, a vessel, a wheel, etc., or seeds, the elements, etc., these are external concatenations. If there is any other existence born of concatenation, this goes against the law of concatenation. Those who hold this view are not established in the principle of correct reasoning. If there is an object coming to exist and yet is non-existent, by what law of causation is there the recognition of it? Things here are of mutual origination, and for this reason causation is declared. Heat, fluidity, motility, solidity, such notions are discriminated by the ignorant. There is a system of relations. No individual objects exist. Hence the denial of self-nature as constituting the realness of objects. The physician varies his treatment according to diseases, though there is no difference in the principle of healing. The difference comes from varieties of diseases. In like manner, in order to save generations of beings from their disease of passions with which they are ill, I teach people with my doctrines, knowing the power of their senses. My doctrine does not vary, but the passions and powers are differentiated. There is just one vehicle. Auspicious is the Eightfold Path. At that time again, Mahamate, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said this to the Blessed One. Impermanence, impermanence. This is the discrimination of the philosophers, Blessed One. And you, too, declare in the canonical texts that all composite things are impermanent. To be subject to birth and destruction is the nature of things. But, Blessed One, is this right or wrong? And how many kinds of impermanency are there, Blessed One? Said the Blessed One, Mahamate, there are 8 kinds of impermanency, as discriminated by the philosophers, but not by me. What are the 8 kinds? 1. Some say that there is origination and then cessation. This is impermanency. That is to say, Mahamate, in the beginning there is something born which ceases to exist. This is impermanency. 2. Some explain impermanency as the changing of shape. 3. Some say form itself is impermanent. 4. Some regard impermanency to consist in the changing of form, saying that in a continuous, uninterrupted existence of all things there takes place a change in their natural flavor. For instance, milk going through a transformation turns into sour milk, and that such an invisible decomposition happens to all things. This is called impermanency. 5. Some imagine that there is an objective existence, which is called impermanency. 6. Some imagine that existence and non-existence, this is impermanency. 7. Some say that not being born is impermanency, because of all things being impermanent, and because of impermanency being inherent in them. Now, Mahamate, by impermanency that exists in existence and non-existence is meant that things made of the elements are by nature subject to destruction and have nothing in them one can take hold of, while the elements themselves are never set in motion. By impermanency that is no birth is meant that there is neither permanency nor impermanency, that in all things there is no dualistic evolution of being and non-being. and that nothing is seen to exist, even when they are examined into the last atom. This not seeing of anything is another name for no birth, and not for birth. This, Mahamate, is the nature of impermanency that is no birth, and as this is not understood, all the philosophers cherish the view of impermanency that is based on birth. Further, Mahamate, by the conception of impermanency as objective existence is meant that there is a discrimination in the philosopher's own mind as to that which is not permanent and that which is not impermanent. What is the sense of this? It means that there is a thing called impermanency, which in itself is not subject to destruction, but by whose working there is the disappearance of all things. And if not for the impermanency, there will be no disappearance of all things. It is like a stick, or a stone, or like a hammer breaking other things to pieces, while itself remains unbroken. This is the philosopher's meaning. But as we actually see things about us, there is no such mutual differentiation, which compels us to say that here is impermanency the cause, and there is the disappearance of all things as the effect. There is no such differentiation of cause and effect, and we cannot say, here is impermanency as cause, and there is the effect. When there is thus no differentiation of cause and effect, all things are permanent, since no cause exists to render them otherwise. Mahamate, as to the disappearance of all things, there is a cause, but it is not in the understanding of the ignorant and simple-minded. When the cause is of a dissimilar nature, the same effect is not produced. In case it does, the impermanency of all things is an example of dissimilar effect, and there is no distinction between cause and effect. But the distinction between cause and effect is observed in them. If there is an objective existence to be known as impermanence, it will be characterized with the nature of an effect-producing cause, and there will be one entity contained in all things. When the notion is cherished of a cause-producing effect, this means that impermanence the cause is impermanent, because it partakes of the nature of the effect which is impermanent. All things, then, are not to be regarded as impermanent, but as permanent. If impermanency as the cause resides within all things, it will come under the three divisions of time. It passes away together with things past. Its future is not yet here, as things of the future are still unborn. In the present, it breaks up together with things of the present. Form, or matter, results from the combination and variation of the elements. As the primary elements and the secondary elements are neither different nor not different, they are by nature not subject to destruction, because according to the philosophers, the elements are indestructible. But, Mahamate, it is an established fact that the entire triple world, with its elements, primary and secondary, is born, abides, and disappears. How do the philosophers conceive a separate existence of impermanency, which is independent of the elements primary and secondary, while the elements themselves are neither set in motion nor destroyed, because they cling to the notion of self-nature as eternally unchangeable? The conception of impermanency as existing in the first origination, which ceases to continue, is not tenable for three reasons. The elements cannot produce one another, because each has its self-nature different from the others. Each individual one cannot produce itself, because there is no differentiation in it. The mutually separated origination of the elements is impossible, because there is no correspondence between the two. Hence the conclusion that the conception of origination impermanency is untenable. By the conception of impermanency in consideration of changes taking place in external form is meant that the elements primary and secondary are not subject to dissolution. What is known as dissolution, Mahamate, even when closely examined until atoms are reached, is not the destruction of the elements primary and secondary, but of their external forms, whereby the elements assume different appearances as short or long. But, in fact, nothing is destroyed in the elemental atoms. What is seen as ceased to exist is the external formation of the elements. This view is cherished by the Samkhya school. By the impermanency of external shapes is meant the impermanency of form, or rupa. What is impermanent is thus the external shape, and not the elements. If the elements themselves are impermanent, all our everyday experiences come to naught. This is cherishing the view of the Lokatika, according to which all things are reducible to mere words, because their self-nature is never seen as born. By the impermanency of changes is meant the changing of forms, or rupa, and not the changing of the elements themselves, as is seen in various ornamental articles of gold, which assume various forms. While there is no disappearance in the nature of gold, the ornamental articles variously change in form. These and other views of impermanency as changes are discriminated variously by the philosophers, as is here described. Fire may burn all the elements, but their self-nature can never be burned. When each goes asunder by itself, there is the destruction of what constitutes the elements, primary and secondary. However, Mahamate, I am neither for permanency nor for impermanency. Why? For these reasons. External objects are not admitted. The triple world is taught as not being anything else but the mind itself. Multiplicities of external existences are not accepted. There is no arising of the elements, nor their disappearance, nor their continuation, nor their differentiation. There are no such things as the elements primary and secondary. Because of discrimination, there evolved the dualistic indications of perceived and perceiving. When it is recognized that because of discrimination there is a duality, the discussion concerning the existence and non-existence of the external world ceases because mind only is understood. Discrimination rises from discriminating a world of effect-producing works. No discrimination takes place when this world is not recognized. Then a man ceases to cherish the discrimination of existence and non-existence, which rises out of his own mind. He sees that things, either of this world or of a higher world or of the highest, are not to be described as permanent or impermanent, because he does not understand the truth that there is nothing in the world but that which is seen of the mind itself. As the meaning of discrimination is not understood by all the philosophers who have fallen into wrong ideas of dualism and who are people of no spiritual attainment, impermanency comes up to them as a subject for discussion. Mahamate, the triple aspect of all things, as distinguished as of this world, of a higher world, and of the highest, is the outcome of word discrimination. But this is not understood by the ignorant and simple-minded. So it is said. By the deluded philosophers, the notion of impermanency is discriminated as origination-cessation, as transformation of external forms, as an independent existence as form. There is no destruction of things. The elements abide forever as regards their self-essence. Immersed in varieties of views, the philosophers discriminate impermanency. To these philosophers there is no destruction, no birth. The elements are permanent as regards their self-essence. Whoever discriminates impermanency? This is the position of the philosophers. According to the Buddha, there is nothing in the world but the mind itself, and all that is of duality has its rise from the mind, and is seen as perceived and perceiving. An ego soul and what belongs to it, they exist not. The abode and realm of Brahma, etc., I declare all to be of mind only. Outside mind only, Brahma, etc., are not attainable. Here ends the third chapter on impermanency in the Lankavatara Mahayana Sutra. Chapter 4. At that time, again, Mahamati the Bodhisattva Mahasattva said this to the Blessed One. Pray tell me, Blessed One, about the state of perfect tranquilization and its further development as attained by all the Bodhisattvas, Shravakas, and Pratyeka Buddhas. For when this further development is thoroughly understood by myself and other Bodhisattva Mahasattvas, all may be saved from being confounded by the happiness which comes from the attainment of perfect tranquilization, and also from falling into the confused state of mind of the Shravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, and philosophers. Said the Blessed One, "Then listen well and reflect well within yourself. I will tell you." "Certainly, Blessed One," said Mahamate the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, and gave ear to the Blessed One. The Blessed One said this to him: "Those Bodhisattva Mahasattvas who have reached the 6th stage, as well as all the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, attain perfect tranquilization. At the 7th stage, the Bodhisattva Mahasattvas, giving up the view of self-nature as subsisting in all things, attain perfect tranquilization in every minute of their mental lives, which is not, however, the case with the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas. For with them there is something effect-producing, and in their attainment of perfect tranquilization there is a trace of dualism, of grasped and grasping. Therefore, they do not attain perfect tranquilization in every minute of their mental lives, which is possible at the 7th stage. They cannot attain to the clear conviction of an undifferentiated state of all things and the cessation of all multiplicities. Their attainment is due to understanding the aspect of all things, in which their self-nature is discriminated as good and not good. Therefore, until the 7th stage, there is not a well-established attainment of tranquilization in every minute of their mental lives. Mahamate, at the 8th stage, the Bodhisattva Mahasattvas, Shravakas, and Pratyeka Buddhas cease cherishing discriminative ideas that arise from the Citta, Manas, and Manovijñāna. From the 1st stage up to the 6th, they perceive that the triple world is no more than the Citta, Manas, and Manovijñāna, that as it is born of a discriminating mind, there is no ego soul and what belongs to it, and that there is no falling into the multitudinousness of external objects except through the discrimination of the mind itself. The ignorant, turning their self-knowledge toward the dualism of grasped and grasping, fail to understand. For there is the working of habit energy, which has been accumulating since beginningless time, owing to false reasoning and discrimination. Mahamate, at the 8th stage, there is nirvana for the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. But the Bodhisattvas are kept away by the power of all the Buddhas from being intoxicated by the bliss of the Samadhi, and thereby they will not enter into nirvana. When the stage of Tathagatahood is not fulfilled, there would be the cessation of all doings. And if the Bodhisattvas were not supported by the Buddhas, the Tathagata family would become extinct. Therefore, the Buddhas, the Blessed Ones, point out the virtues of Buddhahood, which are beyond conception. Therefore, the Bodhisattvas do not enter into nirvana, but the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, engrossed in the bliss of the Samadhis, therein cherish the thought of nirvana. At the 7th stage, Mahamate, the Bodhisattva properly examines into the nature of the Citta, Manas, and Manovijñāna. He examines into such subjects as ego soul and what belongs to it, grasped and grasping, the egolessness of persons and things, rising and disappearing, individuality and generality. He skillfully ascertains the fourfold logical analysis. He enjoys the bliss of self-mastery. He enters successively upon the stages. He knows the differences obtaining in the various elements of enlightenment. The grading of the stages is arranged by me, lest the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, not knowing what is meant by individuality and generality, and failing to understand the continuous development of the successive stages, should fall into the philosopher's wrong way of viewing things. But, Mahamate, there is really nothing arising, nothing disappearing. All is nothing except what is seen of the mind itself. That is, the continuous development of the successive stages and all the multiple doings of the triple world. They are all of the mind itself. This is not understood by the ignorant. I and all the Buddhas establish the doctrine of the stages, which develop successively, as do all the doings of the triple world. Further, Mahamate, the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas at the 8th stage of Bodhisattvahood are so intoxicated with the happiness that comes from the attainment of perfect tranquilization, and failing to understand fully that there is nothing in the world but what is seen of the mind itself, they are thus unable to overcome the hindrance and habit energy growing out of their notions of generality and individuality. And adhering to the egolessness of persons and things, and cherishing views arising therefrom, they have the discriminating idea and knowledge of nirvana, which is not that of the truth of absolute solitude. Mahamate, when the bodhisattvas face and perceive the happiness of the samadhi of perfect tranquilization, they are moved with the feeling of love and sympathy owing to their original vows, and they become aware of the part they are to perform as regards the 10 inexhaustible vows. Thus they do not enter nirvana. But the fact is that they are already in nirvana, because in them there is no rising of discrimination. With them the discrimination of grasped and grasping no more takes place, as they now recognize that there is nothing in the world but what is seen of the mind itself. They have done away with the thought of discrimination concerning all things. They have abandoned adhering to and discriminating about such notions as the citta, mana, and manovijnana, and external objects and self-nature. However, they have not given up the things promoting the cause of Buddhism. Because of their attainment of the inner insight which belongs to the stage of Tathagatahood, whatever they do, all issues from their transcendental knowledge. It is like a man crossing a stream in a dream. For instance, Mahamate, suppose that while sleeping, a man dreams that he is in the midst of a great river, which he earnestly endeavors with all his might to cross by himself. But before he succeeds in crossing the stream, he is awakened from the dream, and being awakened he thinks, "Is this real or unreal?" He thinks again, "No, it is neither real nor unreal." By reason of the habit energy of discrimination which has been accumulated by experience ever since beginningless time, as multiplicities of forms and conditions are seen, heard, thought, and recognized, there is the perception and discrimination of all things as existent and non-existent. And for this reason my manovijnana experiences, even in a dream, all that has been seen by myself. In the same way, Mahamate, the Bodhisattva Mahasattvas of the 8th stage of Bodhisattvahood, after passing through the 1st up to the 7th stage, observe that there is no more rising in them of discrimination, since all things are seen as like Maya, etc., when they have an intuitive understanding of the true nature of all things, and further observing that, therefore, there is the cessation of all things as to grasped and grasping, which rise from one's ardent desire for things, and also observing how the mind and what belongs to it carry on their discrimination, the Bodhisattva Mahasattvas never relax in their efforts to practice the teachings of the Buddhas. Mahamate, they will exercise themselves to make those who have not yet attained the truth attain it. For the Bodhisattvas, nirvana does not mean extinction. as they have abandoned thoughts of discrimination evolving from the Sita, Manos, and Manovijnana, there is for them the attainment of the recognition that all things are unborn. And, Mahamate, in ultimate reality there is neither gradation nor continuous succession. Only the truth of absolute solitude is taught here, in which the discrimination of all images is quieted. So it is said, the abodes and the stages of Buddhahood are established in the mind only, which is imageless. This was told, is told, and will be told by the Buddhas. The first 7 stages are still of the mind, but here the 8th is imageless. The 2 stages, the 9th and the 10th, have still something to rest themselves on. The highest stage that is left belongs to me. Self-realization and absolute purity, this stage is my own. It is the highest station of Mahasvara, the Akanishta heaven, shining brilliantly. Its rays of light move forward like a mass of fire. They who are bright-colored, charming, and auspicious transform the triple world. Some worlds are being transformed, while others have already been transformed. There I preach the various vehicles which belong to my own stage. But from the absolute point of view, the 10th is the first, and the first is the 8th, and the 9th is the 7th, and the 7th is the 8th, and the 2nd is the 3rd, the 4th is the 5th, and the 3rd is the 6th. What gradation is there where imagelessness prevails? Chapter 5. At that time, again, Mahamati the Bodhisattva Mahasattva said this to the Blessed One. Is the Blessed One, the Tathagata, the Arhat, the fully enlightened one, permanent or impermanent? Said the Blessed One, Mahamate, the Tathagata is neither permanent nor impermanent. Why? Because either way there is a fault connected with it. Mahamate, what fault is connected with either assertion? If the Tathagata is permanent, he will be connected with the creating agencies. For, Mahamate, according to all the philosophers, the creating agencies are something uncreated and permanent. But the Tathagata is not permanent in the same sense as the uncreated are permanent. If he is impermanent, he will be connected with things created. Because the skandhas which are predicable as qualified and qualifying are non-existent, and because the skandhas are subject to annihilation, destructibility is their nature. Mahamate, all that is created is impermanent, as is a jug, a garment, straw, a piece of wood, a brick, etc., which are all connected with impermanency. Thus, all the preparations for the knowledge of the All-Knowing One will become useless as they are things created. On account of no distinction being made, the Tathagata indeed would be something created. For this reason, the Tathagata is neither permanent nor impermanent. Again, Mahamati, the Tathagata is not permanent for the reason that, if he were, he would be like space, and the preparations one makes for Tathagatahood would be useless. That is to say, Mahamati, space is neither permanent nor impermanent, as it excludes the idea of permanence and impermanence. And it is improper to speak of it as characterized with the faults of oneness and otherness, of bothness and not bothness, of permanence and impermanence. Further, Mahamati, it is like the horns of a hare, or a horse, or an ass, or a camel, or a frog, or a snake, or a fly, or a fish. With the Tathagata, as with them, here is the permanency of no birth. Because of this fault of the permanency of no birth, the Tathagata cannot be permanent. However, Mahamati, there is another sense in which the Tathagata can be said to be permanent. How? Because the knowledge arising from the attainment of enlightenment, that is, an intuitive understanding, is of a permanent nature, the Tathagata is permanent. Mahamate, This knowledge, as it is attained intuitively by the Tathagatas, Arhats, fully enlightened ones, is indeed permanent. Whether the Tathagatas are born or not, this dharmata, which is the regulative and sustaining principle to be discoverable in the enlightenment of all the Shravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, and philosophers, abides. And this sustaining principle of existence is not like the emptiness of space, which, however, is not understood by the ignorant and simple-minded. Mahamate, this knowledge of enlightenment belonging to the Tathagatas comes forth from transcendental knowledge, or prajna-jnana. Mahamate, the Tathagatas, Arhats, fully enlightened ones, do not come forth from the habit energy of ignorance, which is concerned with the Sita, Manas, and Manovijnana, and the Skandhas, Dhatus, and Ayatanas. The triple world originates from the discriminating of unrealities, but the Tathagatas do not originate from the discriminating of unrealities. Where duality obtains, Mahamate, there is permanency and impermanency, because of its not being one. Mahamate, the truth of absolute solitude is, indeed, non-dualistic, because all things are characterized with non-duality and no birth. For this reason, Mahamate, the Tathagatas, Arhats, fully enlightened ones, are neither permanent nor impermanent. Mahamate, as long as there is word discrimination, there follows the faulty notion of permanency and impermanency. The destruction of the notion of permanency and impermanency, as held by the ignorant, Mahamate, comes from the getting rid of the knowledge that is based on discrimination, and not from the getting rid of the knowledge that is based on the insight of solitude. So it is said, by keeping away permanency and impermanency, and yet by keeping permanency and impermanency in sight, those who always see the Buddhas will not expose themselves to the power of the philosophical doctrines. When permanency and impermanency are adhered to, all the accumulation one makes for the attainment of reality will be of no avail. By destroying the knowledge that is based on discrimination, the idea of permanency and impermanency is kept back. As soon as an assertion is made, all is in confusion. When it is understood that there is nothing in the world but what is seen of the mind itself, disputes never arise. Here ends the 5th chapter on the deduction of the permanency and impermanency of Tathagatahood. At that time, again, Mahamati the Bodhisattva Mahasattva made a request of the Blessed One, saying, Blessed One, tell me, Sugata, tell me about the rising and disappearing of the Skandhas, Dhatus, and Ayatanas. In case there is no ego soul, what is it that comes to exist and to disappear? The ignorant who are attached to the notion of rising and disappearing fail to understand the extinction of pain, and thus they know not what nirvana is. Said the Blessed One, Then, Mahamati, listen well and reflect well within yourself. I will tell you. Mahamati the Bodhisattva Mahasattva said, Certainly, Blessed One, and gave ear to the Blessed One. The Blessed One said this to him, Mahamati, the Tathagata Garbha holds within it the cause for both good and evil, and by it all the forms of existence are produced. Like an actor, it takes on a variety of forms, and in itself is devoid of an ego soul and what belongs to it. As this is not understood, there is the functioning together of the triple combination from which effects take place. But the philosophers, not knowing this, are tenaciously attached to the idea of a cause or a creating agency. Because of the influence of habit energy that has been accumulating variously by false reasoning since beginningless time, what here goes under the name of alaya vijnana is accompanied by the 7 vijnanas, which give birth to a state known as the abode of ignorance. It is like a great ocean, in which the waves roll on permanently, but the deeps remain unmoved. That is, the alaya body itself subsists uninterruptedly, quite free from fault of impermanence, unconcerned with the doctrine of ego substance, and thoroughly pure in its essential nature. As to the other 7 Vijnanas, beginning with the Manas and Manovijnana, they have their rise and complete ending from moment to moment. They are born with false discrimination as cause, and with forms and appearance and objectivity as conditions, which are intimately linked together. Adhering to names and forms, they do not realize that objective individual forms are no more than what is seen of the mind itself. They do not give exact information regarding pleasure and pain. They are not the cause of emancipation. By setting up names and forms which originate from greed, greed is begotten in turn, thus mutually conditioned and conditioning. When the sense organs which seize upon the objective world are destroyed and annihilated, the other things immediately cease to function, and there is no recognition of pleasure and pain, which are the self-discrimination of knowledge. Thus there is the attainment of perfect tranquilization, in which thoughts and sensations are quieted, or there is the realization of the 4 dhyanas, in which truths of emancipation are well understood, whereupon the yogins are led to cherish herein the notion of true emancipation, because of the not arising of the Vijnanas. But when a revulsion or turning back has not taken place in the alaya Vijnana, known under the name of Tathāgatagarbha, there is no cessation of the 7 evolving Vijnanas. Why? Because the evolution of the Vijnanas is depending on this cause. But this does not belong to the realm of the Shravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, and those who are disciplining themselves in the exercises of the philosophers. As they only know the egolessness of the self-soul, as they only accept the individuality and generality of the skandhas, dhatus, and ayatanas, there is the evolving of the Tathāgatagarbha. When an insight into the 5 dharmas, the 3 svabhavas, and the egolessness of all things is obtained, the Tathāgatagarbha becomes quiescent. By causing a revulsion in the continuous development of the graded stages, the bodhisattva may not be led astray in the path of enlightenment by those philosophers who hold different views. Thus, establishing himself at the bodhisattva stage of acala, or immovable, he obtains the paths leading to the happiness of the 10 samadhis. Supported by the Buddhas in samadhi, observing the truths of the Buddha which go beyond thought and his own original vows, not entering into the happiness of the samadhi which is the limit of reality, but by means of the self-realization which is not generally gained by the paths of discipline belonging to the Shravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, and philosophers, he obtains the 10 paths of discipline which belong to the noble family of the Tathāgatas, and also obtains the knowledge body created by the will, which is removed from the premeditated workings of samadhi. For this reason, Mahamate, let those bodhisattva mahasattvas who are seeking after the exalted truth effect the purification of the Tathāgatagarbha, which is known as alaya Vijnana. Mahamate, if you say that there is no Tathāgatagarbha, known as alaya Vijnana, there will be neither the rising nor the disappearing of an external world of multiplicities, in the absence of the Tathāgatagarbha, known as alaya Vijnana. But, Mahamate, there is the rising and disappearing of the ignorant, as well as the holy ones. Therefore, the yogins, while walking in the noble path of self-realization and abiding in the enjoyment of things as they are, do not abandon working hard and are never frustrated in their undertakings. Mahamate, this realm of the Tathāgatagarbha is primarily undefiled and is beyond the speculative theories of the Shravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, and philosophers. But it appears to them devoid of purity, as it is soiled by these external defilements. This is not the case with the Tathāgatas, Mahamati. With the Tathagatas, it is an intuitive experience, as if it were an amalaka fruit held in the palm of the hand. This, Mahamate, was told me in the canonical text relating to Queen Srimala, and in another, where the bodhisattvas endowed with subtle, fine, pure knowledge are supported by my spiritual powers, that the Tathagata Garbha known as Alaya Vijnana evolves together with the 7 Vijnanas. This is meant for the Shravakas who are not free from attachment, to make them see into the egolessness of things. And for Queen Srimala, to whom the Buddha's spiritual power was added, the pure realm of the Tathagatahood was expounded. This does not belong to the realm of speculation, as it is carried on by the Shravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, and other philosophers, except, Mahamate, that this realm of Tathagatahood, which is the realm of the Tathagata Garbha Alaya Vijnana, is meant for those bodhisattva mahasattvas who, like you, are endowed with subtle, fine, penetrating thought power, and whose understanding is in accordance with the meaning. And it is not for others, such as philosophers, Shravakas, and Pratyeka Buddhas, who are attached to the letters of the canonical texts. For this reason, Mahamate, let you and other bodhisattva mahasattvas discipline yourselves in the realm of Tathagatahood, in the understanding of this Tathagata Garbha Alaya Vijnana, so that you may not rest contented with mere learning. So it is said, the Garbha of the Tathagatas is indeed united with the 7 Vijnanas. When this is adhered to, there arises duality. But when rightly understood, duality ceases. The mind, which is the product of intellection since beginningless time, is seen like a mere image. When things are viewed as they are in themselves, there is neither objectivity nor its appearance. As the ignorant grasp the fingertip and not the moon, so those who cling to the letter know not my truth. The Sita dances like a dancer. The Manas resembles a jester. The Manovijnana, together with the 5 Vijnanas, creates an objective world which is like a stage. At that time, Mahamate, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, made a request of the Blessed One, saying, "Pray, tell me, Blessed One, pray, tell me, Sugata, concerning the distinguishing aspects of the 5 dharmas, the 3 svabhavas, the 8 vijnanas, and the twofold egolessness. By recognizing the distinguishing aspects of the twofold egolessness, I and other bodhisattva mahasattvas will be able to establish those truths while effecting a continuous development through the various stages of bodhisattvahood. It is said that by these truths we can enter into all the Buddha truths, and that by entering into all the Buddha truths we can enter even into the ground of the Tathagata's inner realization." Said the Blessed One, "Then, Mahamate, listen well and reflect well within yourself. I will tell you." "Certainly, Blessed One," said Mahamate the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, and gave ear to the Blessed One. The Blessed One said this to him, "Mahamate, I will tell you about the distinguishing aspects of the 5 dharmas, the 3 svabhavas, the 8 vijnanas, and the twofold egolessness. The 5 dharmas are name, form, discrimination, right knowledge, and suchness. When these are thoroughly comprehended by the yogins, they enter into the course of the Tathagata's inner realization, where they are kept away from such views as eternalism and nihilism, realism and negativism, and where they come face to face with the abode of happiness belonging to the present existence as well as to the samapati, or tranquilization. But, Mahamate, as the ignorant do not understand that the 5 dharmas, the 3 svabhavas, the 8 vijnanas, and the twofold egolessness, together with the external objects which are regarded as existent and non-existent, all these are no more than what is seen of the mind itself. They are given to discrimination. but it is otherwise with the wise. Said Mahamate, how is it that the ignorant are given up to discrimination and the wise are not? Said the Blessed One, Mahamate, the ignorant cling to names, ideas, and signs. Their minds move along these channels. As thus they move along, they feed on multiplicities of objects and fall into the notion of an ego soul and what belongs to it, and cling to salutary experiences. As thus they cling, there is a reversion to ignorance, and they become tainted. Karma, born of greed, anger, and folly, is accumulated. As karma is accumulated again and again, their minds become swathed in the cocoon of discrimination as the silkworm, and, transmigrating in the ocean of birth and death, they are unable, like the water-drawing wheel, to move forward. And because of folly, they do not understand that all things are like Maya, a mirage, the moon and water, and have no self-substance to be imagined as an ego soul and its belongings, that things arise from their false discrimination, that they are devoid of qualified and qualifying, and have nothing to do with the course of birth, abiding, and destruction, that they are born of the discrimination of what is only seen of the mind itself, and assert that they are born of Isvara, time, atoms, or a supreme spirit, for they follow names and appearances. Mahamate, the ignorant move along with appearances. Further, Mahamate, by appearance is meant that which reveals itself to the visual sense and is perceived as form, and in like manner that which appearing to the sense of hearing, smelling, tasting, the body, and the Manavijnana is perceived as sound, odor, taste, tactility, and idea. All this I call appearance. Further, Mahamate, by discrimination is meant that by which names are declared, and there is thus the indicating of various appearances. Saying that this is such and no other, for instance, saying that this is an elephant, a horse, a wheel, a pedestrian, a woman, or a man, each idea thus discriminated is so determined. Further, Mahamate, by right knowledge is meant this: when names and appearances are seen as unobtainable owing to their mutual conditioning, there is no more rising of the Vijnanas, for nothing comes to annihilation, nothing abides everlastingly. And when there is thus no falling back into the stage of the philosophers, Shravakas, and Pratyeka Buddhas, it is said that there is right knowledge. Further, Mahamate, by reason of this right knowledge, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva does not regard name as reality and appearance as non-reality. When erroneous views, based on the dualistic notion of assertion and negation, are gotten rid of, and when the vijnanas cease to rise as regards the objective world of names and appearances, this I call suchness. Mahamati, a bodhisattva mahasattva who is established on suchness, attains the state of imagelessness, and thereby attains the bodhisattva stage of joy or pramudita. When the bodhisattva attains the stage of joy, he or she is kept away from all the evil courses belonging to the philosophers, and enters upon the path of supra-worldly truths. When all the conditions of truth are brought to consummation, he or she discerns that the course of all things starts with the notion of Maya, etc., and after the attainment of the noble truth of self-realization, he or she earnestly desires to put a stop to speculative theorization. And, going up in succession through the stages of bodhisattvahood, he or she finally reaches the stage of Dharma cloud, or Dharma megha. After being at the stage of Dharma cloud, he or she reaches as far as the stage of Tathagatahood, where the flowers of the samadhis, powers of self-control, and psychic faculties are in bloom. After reaching here, in order to bring all beings to maturity, he or she shines like the moon in water, with varieties of rays of transformation. Perfectly fulfilling the 10 inexhaustible vows, he or she preaches the Dharma to all beings according to their various understandings. As the Bodhisattva Mahasattvas, Mahamati, have entered into suchness, they attain the body which is free from the will and thought constructions. Again, Mahamati said, "Are the 3 svabhavas to be regarded as included in the 5 dharmas, or as having their own characteristics complete in themselves?" The Blessed One said, "The 3 svabhavas, the 8 vijnanas, and the twofold egolessness, they are all included in the 5 dharmas. Of these, name and appearance are known as parikalpita, or false imagination. Then, Mahamate, discrimination which arises depending upon them is the notion of an ego soul, and what belongs to it. The notion and the discrimination are of simultaneous occurrence, like the rising of the sun and its rays." Mahamati, the discrimination thus supporting the notion of self-nature, which subsists in the multiplicities of objects, is called the paratantra, or dependence on another. Right knowledge and suchness, Mahamate, are indestructible, and thus they are known as parinishpana, or perfect knowledge. Further, Mahamati, by adhering to what is seen of the mind itself, there is an 8-fold discrimination. This comes from imagining unreal individual appearances as real. When the twofold clinging to an ego soul and what belongs to it is stopped, there is the birth of the twofold egolessness. Mahamate, in these 5 dharmas are included all the Buddha truths, and also the differentiation and succession of the bodhisattva stages, and the entrance of the Shravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and Tathagatas into the state of self-realization by means of their noble wisdom. Further, Mahamati, of the 5 dharmas, name, appearance, discrimination, right knowledge, and suchness. Appearance is that which is seen as having such characteristics as form, shape, distinctive features, images, colors, etc. This is appearance. Out of this appearance, ideas are formed, such as a jar, etc., by which one can say, "This is such and no other." This is name. When names are thus pronounced, appearances are determined, and there is discrimination, saying this is mind and this is what belongs to it. That these names and appearances are, after all, unobtainable, because when intellection is put away, the aspect of mutuality in which all things are determined ceases to be perceived and imagined. This is called the suchness of things, and this suchness may be characterized as truth, reality, exact knowledge, limit, source, self-substance, the unattainable. This has been realized by myself in the Tathagatas, truthfully pointed out, recognized, made public, and widely shown. When, in agreement with this, the truth is rightly understood as neither negative nor affirmative, discrimination ceases to rise, and there is a state conformable to self-realization by means of noble wisdom, which is not the course of controversy pertaining to the philosophers, Shravakas, and Pratyeka Buddhas. This is right knowledge. These are, Mahamate, the 5 dharmas, and in them are included the 3 svabhavas, the 8 vijnanas, the twofold egolessness, and all the Buddha truths. In this, Mahamate, reflect well with your own wisdom, and let others do the same, and do not allow yourself to be led by another. So it is said. The 5 dharmas, the svabhavas, the 8 vijnanas, and the twofold egolessness, they are all embraced in the Mahayana. Name, appearance, and discrimination correspond to the first 2 svabhavas, while right knowledge and suchness are the parinishpana, or perfect knowledge. At that time, again, Mahamate, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said this to the Blessed One. It is told by the Blessed One, in the canonical text, the Tathagatas of the past, present, and future are like the sands of the river Ganga. Blessed One, is this to be accepted literally, or is there another distinct meaning? Pray tell me, Blessed One. The Blessed One said, Mahamate, do not take it in its literal sense. For, Mahamate, the Buddhas of the 3 divisions of time are not measurable by the measurement of the sands of the Ganga. Why? Because an analogy which is superior to anything of the world and surpasses it cannot be called an analogy, since there is in it something resembling and something non-resembling. The Tathagatas, Arhats, fully enlightened ones, do not give out such an analogy that has in it something resembling and something not resembling, and that is superior to the world and surpasses it. But this comparison is only given out, Mahamate, by myself and the Tathagatas, in which the Tathagatas, Arhats, fully enlightened ones, are said to be like the sands of the river Ganga. The idea is to terrify those ignorant and simple-minded ones who, tenaciously clinging to the idea of permanency and impermanency, and giving themselves up to the ways of thinking and the erroneous views of the philosophers, follow up the wheel of transmigration. To those who, anxious to escape the intricacies of the wheel of existence, seek after the excellent state, thinking how this could be realized, it is told to them that the appearance of the Tathagatas is not like the blooming of the Addendum flower, because they will thereby see that the attainment of Buddhahood is not a difficult undertaking, and will put forward their energy. But it is told in the canonical text that the Tathagatas appear as rarely as the Addendum flower, and this is in consideration of those people who are to be led by me. Mahamate, however, no one has ever seen the Addendum flower blooming, nor will anyone. While, Mahamate, the Tathagatas are at present in the world, they were seen and are to be seen. To say that the Tathagatas appear as rarely as the Addendum flower has really no reference to the establishment of the truth itself. When, Mahamate, the establishment of the truth itself is pointed out, it surpasses beyond measure anything in the world that can be offered as an analogy to it, because the ignorant are incapable of believing. And thus there is an unbelief on the part of the ignorant and simple-minded. There is indeed no room for analogies to enter in the realm of self-realization, which is effected by means of noble wisdom. The truth transcends all the notions that are characteristic of the Sita, Manas, and Manavijnana. The truth is the Tathagatas, and therefore in them there is nothing describable by analogy. But, Mahamate, sometimes a comparison is made use of. That is to say, the Tathagatas are said to be like sands of the river Ganga, because they are the same and impartial to all things, because they are free from imagination and discrimination. For example, Mahamate, the sands of the river Ganga are tossed about by the fishes, tortoises, porpoises, crocodiles, buffaloes, lions, elephants, etc. But they are not free from imagination and discrimination, for they do not resent, saying, "We are downtrodden," or "We are not." They are non-discriminative, pure in themselves, separated from defilement. In the same way, Mahamate, the self-realization of noble wisdom which has been attained by the Tathagatas, Arhats, fully enlightened ones, is like the river Ganga, and their powers, psychic faculties, and self-control are like the sands. And however much they are tossed about by the fishes of the philosophers, by the ignorant who belong to other schools, they are not troubled by imaginations and discriminations. Because of their original vows, the Tathagatas, whose hearts are filled with all the happiness of the Samapatti, are not troubled by imaginations and discriminations with regard to beings. Therefore, the Tathagatas, like the sands of the river Ganga, are free from partiality because of their being devoid of likes and dislikes. To illustrate, Mahamate, as the sands of the river Ganga partake of the character of the earth, the conflagration that will break out at the end of the Kalpa may burn the earth, but does not destroy its self-nature. Mahamate, the earth is not consumed because of its being inseparably connected with the element of fire, and it is only the ignorant and simple-minded that on account of their falling into false ideas imagine the earth being consumed by fire. But as it supplies the material cause to the element fire, it is never consumed. In the same way, Mahamate, the Dharmakaya of the Tathagatas, like the sands of the river Ganga, is never destroyed. To illustrate, Mahamate, the sands of the river Ganga are immeasurable. In the same way, Mahamate, the rays of light of the Tathagatas are beyond measure, which are emitted by them in all the Buddha assemblies in order to bring beings to maturity and arouse them to the knowledge of the truth. To illustrate, Mahamate, the sands of the river Ganga do not assume another nature than itself, remaining forever the same. In the same way, Mahamate, the Tathagatas, Arhats, fully enlightened ones, are neither evolving nor disappearing in transmigration, because in them the cause of making them come into existence is destroyed. To illustrate, Mahamate, the sands of the river Ganga are unconcerned whether they are carried away or whether more is added into them. In the same way, Mahamate, the knowledge of the Tathagatas, which is exercised for the maturing of beings, is neither exhausted nor augmented, because the Dharma is without a physical body. Mahamate, that which has a physical body is subject to annihilation, but not that which has no physical body, and the Dharma is not a physical body. To illustrate, Mahamate, the sands of the river Ganga, however much they are compressed for the sake of the ghee and oil, are destitute of them. In the same way, Mahamate, the Tathagatas never abandon their deep concerns and original vows and happiness as regards the Dharma Dhatu, however hard they are oppressed with pain for the sake of beings, as long as all beings have not yet been led into nirvana by the Tathagatas, who are endowed with a great compassionate heart. To illustrate, Mahamate, the sands of the river Ganga are drawn along with the flow of the stream, but not where there is no water. In the same way, Mahamate, the Tathagata's teaching in regard to all the Buddha truths takes place along the flow of the nirvana stream. And for this reason, the Tathagatas are said to be like the sands of the river Ganga. Mahamate, in Tathagata, or thus come, there is no sense of going away. Mahamate, going away means destruction. Mahamate, the primary limit of transmigration is unknown. Not being known, how can I talk of the sense of going away? The sense of going away, Mahamate, is annihilation, and this is not known by the ignorant and simple-minded. Mahamate said, If, Blessed One, the primary limit of transmigration of all beings is unknowable, how is the emancipation of beings knowable? The Blessed One said, Mahamate, when it is understood that the objective world is nothing but what is seen of the mind itself, the habit energy of false speculations and erroneous discriminations which have been going on since beginningless time is removed, and there is a revulsion or turning back at the basis of discrimination. This is emancipation, Mahamate, and not annihilation. Therefore, Mahamate, there cannot be any talk about endlessness. To be endless in limit, Mahamate, is another name for discrimination. Apart from discriminations, there are no other beings. When all things, external or internal, are examined with intelligence, Mahamate, knowing and known are found to be quiescent. But when it is not recognized that all things rise from the discrimination of the mind itself, discrimination asserts itself. So when this is understood, discrimination ceases. So it is said, those who regard the removers of obstruction, that is, Buddhas, as neither destroyed nor departed forever, like the sands of the Ganga, they see the Tathagata. Like the sands of the Ganga, they are devoid of all error. They flow along the stream and are permanent, and so is the essence or nature of Buddhahood. At that time again, Mahamate, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said this to the Blessed One. Tell me, Blessed One, tell me, Sugata, Tathagata, Arhat, fully enlightened one, regarding the momentary destruction of all things and their distinctive signs. Blessed One, what is meant by all things being momentary? The Blessed One replied, Then, Mahamate, listen well and reflect well within yourself. I will tell you. Certainly, Blessed One, said Mahamate the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, and gave ear to the Blessed One. The Blessed One said this to him, Mahamate, all things we speak of, and they are good or bad, effect-producing or not effect-producing, of this world or of the super-world, faulty or faultless, of evil flowings or the non-outflowings, receptive or non-receptive. In short, Mahamate, the 5 appropriating skandhas have their rise from the habit energy of the Citta, Manas, and Manavijnana. They are imagined, good or bad. Mahamate, the happiness of the Samadhi and the attainments resulting therefrom, which belong to the wise by reason of their abiding in the happiness of the existing world, are called the non-outflowing goods. Again, Mahamate, by good and bad are meant the 8 Vijnanas. What are the 8? They are the Tathagata Garbha, known as the Alaya Vijnana, Manas, Manavijnana, and the system of the 5 Vijnanas as described by the philosophers. Now, Mahamate, the system of the 5 Vijnanas is together with the Manavijnana, and there is an undivided succession and differentiation of good and bad, and the entire body moves on continuously and closely bound together. Moving on, it comes to an end. But as it fails to understand that there is nothing in the world but what is seen of mind only, there is the rising of another Vijnana system, following the cessation of the first. And the Manavijnana, in union with the system of the 5 Vijnanas, perceiving the difference of forms and figures, is set in motion, not remaining still even for a moment. This I call momentariness. Mahamate, momentary, is the Alaya Vijnana, known as the Tathagata Garbha, which is together with the Manas and with the habit energy of the evolving Vijnanas. This is momentary. But the alaya vijnana, which is together with the habit energy of the non-outflows, is not momentary. This is not understood by the ignorant and simple-minded who are addicted to the doctrine of momentariness. Not understanding the momentariness and non-momentariness of all things, they cherish nihilism, whereby they even try to destroy the unmade. Mahamate, the system itself of the 5 vijnanas, is not subject to transmigration, nor does it suffer pleasure and pain, nor is it conducive to nirvana. But Mahamate, the Tathagata Garbha, is together with the cause that suffers pleasure and pain. It is this that is set in motion and ceases to work. It is stupefied by the fourfold habit energy. But the ignorant do not understand it, as their thoughts are infused with the habit energy of discrimination, which cherishes the view of momentariness. Further, Mahamate, gold, vajra, and the relics of the Buddha, owing to their specific character, are never destroyed, but remain the same until the end of time. If, Mahamate, the nature of enlightenment is momentary, the wise would lose their wiseness, but they have never lost it. Mahamate, gold and vajra remain the same until the end of time. Remaining the same, they are neither diminished nor increased. How is it that the ignorant, failing to recognize the hidden meaning of all things internal and external, discriminate in the sense of momentariness? Further, Mahamate said, "It is again said by the Blessed One that by fulfilling the 6 paramitas, Buddhahood is realized. What are the 6 paramitas, and how are they fulfilled?" The Blessed One replied, "Mahamate, there are 3 kinds of paramitas. What are the 3? They are the worldly, the superworldly, and the highest superworldly. Of these, Mahamate, the worldly paramitas are practiced thus: adhering tenaciously to the notion of an ego soul and what belongs to it, and holding fast to dualism, those who are desirous for this world of form, etc., will practice the paramita of charity in order to obtain the various realms of existence. In the same way, Mahamate, the ignorant will practice the paramitas of morality, patience, energy, dhyana, and prajna. Attaining the psychic powers, they will be born in Brahma's heaven. As to the superworldly paramitas, they are practiced by the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, whose thoughts are possessed by the notion of nirvana. The paramitas of charity, etc., are thus performed by them, who, like the ignorant, are desirous of enjoying nirvana for themselves. Again, Mahamate, as to the highest, superworldly paramitas, they are practiced by the Bodhisattva Mahasattvas, who are the practicers of the highest form of spiritual discipline. That is, perceiving that there is nothing in the world but what is only seen of the mind itself on account of discrimination, and understanding that duality is of the mind itself, they see that discrimination ceases to function, and that seizing and holding is non-existent, and free from all thoughts of attachment to individual objects which are of the mind itself, and in order to benefit and give happiness to all sentient beings, the Bodhisattvas practice the paramita of charity. While dealing with an objective world, there is no arising in them of discrimination. They just practice morality, and this is the paramita of morality. To practice patience with no thought of discrimination rising in them, and yet with full knowledge of grasped and grasping, this is the paramita of patience. To exert oneself with energy from the first part of the night to its end, and in conformity with the disciplinary measures, and not to give rise to discrimination, this is the paramita of energy. Not to cherish discrimination, not to fall into the philosopher's notion of nirvana. This is the paramita of dhyana. As to the paramita of prajna, when the discrimination of the mind itself ceases, when things are thoroughly examined by means of intelligence, there is no falling into dualism, and a revulsion takes place at the basis while previous karma is not destroyed. When transcendental knowledge is exercised for the accomplishment of self-realization, then there is the paramita of prajna. These, Mahamate, are the paramitas and their meanings. So it is said, the created or samskrita are empty, impermanent, momentary, so the ignorant discriminate. The meaning of momentariness is discriminated by means of the analogies of a river, a lamp, and seeds. All things are non-existent. They are not momentary, quiescent, not subject to destruction, and unborn. This, I say, is the meaning of momentariness. Birth and death succeed without interruption. This I do not point out for the ignorant. Owing to the uninterrupted succession of existence, discrimination moves on in the 6 paths. Ignorance is the cause, and there is the general rising of minds. When form is not yet born, where is the abode of the middle existence? If another mind is set in motion in an uninterrupted succession of deaths, where does it find its dependence, as form is not established in time? If mind is set in motion, somewhere, somehow, the cause is an unreal one. It is not complete. How can one know of its momentary disappearances? The attainment of the yogins, gold, the Buddha relics, and the heavenly palace of Abhasvara are indestructible by any worldly agencies. Ever abiding are the truths attained by the Buddhas and their perfect knowledge. The nature of Buddhahood as realized by them, how can there be momentariness in them? The city of the Gandharvas, Maya-like forms, how can they be otherwise than momentary? Realities are characterized with unreality. How can they be causal agencies? Here ends the 6th chapter on momentariness. Chapter 7. At that time, again, Mahamate, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said this to the Blessed One. How was it that the Arhats were given assurance by the Blessed One of their attainment of supreme enlightenment? How can all beings attain to Tathagatahood without realizing the truths of parinirvana? What does it mean that from the night when the Tathagata was awakened to supreme enlightenment until the night when he entered into parinirvana, between these times the Tathagata has not uttered, has not pronounced a word? What is the meaning of this, that being always in samadhi, the Tathagatas neither deliberate nor contemplate? How do Buddhas of transformation, being in the state of transformation, execute the works of the Tathagatas? How is the succession of momentary decomposition explained, which takes place in the Vijnanas? Further, what do these statements mean? That Vajrapani is constantly with the Tathagata as his personal guard, that the primary limit is unknown and yet cessation is knowable, that there are evil ones, their activities, and leftover karma. Blessed One, facts of karma hindrance are said to be shown by the Tathagata in the incident of Chanka, the daughter of a Brahmin, of Sundari, the daughter of a mendicant, an empty bowl, etc. How can the Blessed One with these unexhausted evils attain all knowledge? The Blessed One replied, Then, Mahamate, listen well and reflect within yourself. I will tell you. Certainly, Blessed One, said Mahamate the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, and gave ear to the Blessed One. The Blessed One said this to him. The realm of nirvana, where no substratum is left behind, is according to the hidden meaning, and for the sake of the practicers, who are thereby inspired to exert themselves in the work of the Bodhisattvas. Mahamate, there are Bodhisattvas practicing the work of the Bodhisattva here and in other Buddha lands, who, however, are desirous of attaining the nirvana of the Sravakayana. In order to turn their inclination away from the Sravakayana and to make them exert themselves in the course of the Mahayana, the Shravakas in transformation are given an assurance as to their future Buddhahood by the body of transformation. But this is not done by the Dharmata Buddha. This giving assurance to the Shravakas Mahamate is declared according to the hidden meaning. Mahamate, that the abandonment of passion hindrance by the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas is not different from that by the Tathagatas, is due to the sameness of the taste of emancipation. But this does not apply to the abandonment of knowledge hindrance. Knowledge hindrance, Mahamate, is purified when the egolessness of things is distinctly perceived. But passion hindrance is destroyed when first the egolessness of persons is perceived and acted upon, for then the manovijnana ceases to function. Further, dharma hindrance is given up, because of the disappearance of the habit energy accumulated in the alaya vijnana. It is now thoroughly purified. There is an eternally abiding reality, which is to be understood according to the hidden meaning, because it is something that has neither antecedents nor consequence. The Tathagata points out the Dharma without deliberation, without contemplation, and by means of such words that are original and independent. Because of his right thinking, and because of his unfailing memory, he neither deliberates nor contemplates. He is no more at the stage of the fourfold habit energy. He is free from the twofold death. He has relinquished the twofold hindrance of passion and knowledge. Mahamate, the seven vijnanas, that is, manas, manovijnana, I-vijnana, etc., are characterized with momentariness. Because they originate from habit energy, they are destitute of the good non-outflowing factors and are not transmigratory. What transmigrates, Mahamate, is the Tathagata Garbha, which is the cause of nirvana as well as that of pleasure and pain. This is not understood by the ignorant, whose minds are torn asunder by the notion of emptiness. Mahamate, the Tathagatas, who are accompanied by Vajrapani, are the Tathagatas transformed in transformation, and are not the original Tathagatas, Arhats, fully enlightened ones. The original Tathagatas, Mahamate, are indeed beyond all sense and measurement, beyond the reach of all ignorant ones, Shravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, and philosophers. These Tathagatas are abiding in the joy of existence as it is, as they have reached the truth of intuitive knowledge by means of jnana-kshanti. Thus, Vajrapani is not attached to them. All the Buddhas of transformation do not owe their existence to karma. In them there is no Tathagatahood. But apart from them, there is no Tathagatahood either. Like the potter, who is dependent on various combinations, the Buddha of transformation does his work for sentient beings. He teaches the doctrine meeting conditions, but not the doctrine that will establish the truth as it is, which belongs to the noble realm of self-realization. Further, Mahamate, on account of the cessation of the six vijnanas, the ignorant and simple-minded look for nihilism, and on account of their not understanding the alaya vijnana, they have eternalism. The primary limit of the discrimination of their own minds is unknown, Mahamate. Emancipation is obtained when this discrimination of mind itself ceases. With the abandonment of the fourfold habit energy, the abandonment of all faults takes place. So it is said. The three vehicles are no vehicle. There is no nirvana with the Buddhas. It is pointed out that the assurance of Buddhahood is given to all that are freed from faults. Ultimate intuitive knowledge, nirvana that leaves no remnant, this is told according to the hidden meaning in order to give encouragement to the timid. Knowledge is produced by the Buddhas, and the path is pointed out by them. They move in it and not in anything else. Therefore, there is no nirvana with them. Existence, desire, form or rupa, theorizing, this is the fourfold habit energy. This is where the manovijnana takes its rise, and the alaya and manas abide. Nihilism and the idea of impermanency rise because of the Manavijnana, the I-Vijnana, etc. Eternalism rises from the thought that there is no beginning in nirvana, intelligence, and theorization. Here ends the 7th chapter on transformation. Like the potter, who is dependent on various combinations, the Buddha of transformation does his work for sentient beings. He teaches the doctrine meeting conditions, but not the doctrine that will establish the truth as it is, which belongs to the noble realm of self-realization. Further, Mahamate, on account of the cessation of the 6 Vijnanas, the ignorant and simple-minded look for nihilism, and on account of their not understanding the Alaya Vijnana, they have eternalism. The primary limit of the discrimination of their own minds is unknown, Mahamate. Emancipation is obtained when this discrimination of mind itself ceases. With the abandonment of the fourfold habit energy, the abandonment of all faults takes place. So it is said, the 3 vehicles are no vehicle. There is no nirvana with the Buddhas. It is pointed out that the assurance of Buddhahood is given to all that are freed from faults. Ultimate intuitive knowledge, nirvana that leaves no remnant, this is told according to the hidden meaning in order to give encouragement to the timid. Knowledge is produced by the Buddhas, and the path is pointed out by them. They move in it and not in anything else. Therefore, there is no nirvana with them. Existence, desire, form or rupa, theorizing, this is the fourfold habit energy. This is where the Manavijnana takes its rise, and the Alaya and Manas abide. Nihilism and the idea of impermanency rise because of the Manavijnana, the I-Vijnana, etc. Eternalism rises from the thought that there is no beginning in nirvana, intelligence, and theorization. Here ends the 7th chapter on transformation. Chapter 9. At that time, the Blessed One addressed Mahamate, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva. Mahamate, you should hold forth these magical phrases of the Lankavatara, which were recited, are recited, and will be recited by the Buddhas of the past, present, and future. I will recite them here for the benefit of the proclaimers of the Dharma, who will retain them in memory. They are Tute, Tute, Vute, Vute, Pate, Pate, Kate, Kate, Amale, Amale, Vimale, Vimale, Nime, Nime, Hime, Hime, Vame, Vame, Kale, 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 Ate, Mate, Vate, Tuti, Jnete, Spute, Kate, Kate, Late, Pate, Dime, Dime, Chale, Chale, Pace, Pace, Bade, Bande, Anse, Manse, Tutare, Tutare, Patara, Patare, Arika, Arika, Sarika, Sarika, Charaka, Charaka, Dima, Dima, Hima, Hima, Tu, 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 Du, 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 Ru, 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 Fu, 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 Svaha. These, Mahamate, are the magical phrases of the Lankavatara Sutra. If sons and daughters of good family should hold forth, retain, proclaim, realize these magical phrases, no one should ever be able to effect his descent upon them. Whether it be a god or a goddess, or a naga or a nagi, or a yaksha or a yakshi, or an asura or an asuri, or a garuda or a garudi, or a kinara or a kanari, or a mahoraga or a mahoragi, or a gandharva or a gandharvi, or a bhuta or a Bhuti, or a Kumbhanda, or a Kumbhandi, or a Pisara, or a Pisachi, or an Astaraka, or an Astaraki, or an Apasmara, or an Apasmari, or a Rakshasa, or a Rakshasi, or a Daka, or a Dakini, or an Aujohara, or an Aujohari, or a Kataputana, or a Kataputani, or an Amanusha, or an Amanushi. No one of these will be able to effect his or her descent upon the holder of these magical phrases. If any misfortune should befall, let him recite the magical phrases for 108 times, and the evil ones will, wailing and crying, turn away and go in another direction. I will tell you, Mahamate, other magical phrases. They are Padmi, Padmadive, Hine, 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 Chu, Chule, Chulu, Chule, Fale, Fula, Fule, Yule, Gule, Yula, Yule, Gule, Gula, Gule, Pale, 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 Munche, Munchi, Munchi, Chinde, Binde, Banje, Marde, Pramarde, Dinakare, Svaha. If, Mahamate, any son or daughter of good family should hold forth, retain, proclaim, and realize these magical phrases, on him or her no evil beings should be able to make their descent. Whether it be a god or a goddess, or a naga or a nagi, or a yaksha or a yakshi, or an asura or an asuri, a garuda or a garudi, a kinara or a kinari, or a mahoraga or a mahoragi, or a Gandharva, or a Gandharvi, or a Bhuta, or a Bhuti, or a Kumbhanda, or a Kumbhandi, or a Pisacha, or a Pisachi, or an Astaraka, or an Astaraki, or an Apasmara, or an Apasmari, or a Rakshasa, or a Rakshasi, or a Daka, or a Dakini, or an Aujara, or an Aujari, or a Kataputana, or a Kataputani, or an Amanusha, or an Amanushi. No one of these will be able to effect his or her descent upon the holder of these magical phrases. By him who will recite these magical phrases, the whole Lankavatara Sutra will be recited. These magical phrases are given by the Blessed One to guard against the interference of the Rakshasas. Here ends the 9th chapter, called Dharani in the Lankavatara.